Recording. Oh, my God. All kinds of people coming in. The Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting for June 14th, 2019 will commence. Let's have a roll call, please.
Okay, and I'm going to be doing that in our secretary's absence. Bunky may join us later, but he's not here right now. Mr. Trunzo.
Here.
Mr. Strange.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Chairman Mellon.
Here.
Mr. Hubbard.
Here.
Okay, so we have Joyce is out, and I'm here. Susan Gay is here. So we have Joyce out and Lee out in addition to,
And we have a quorum.
and we have a quorum.
Just for information, Joyce is recovering from surgery and on her way. Wishes she could be here today, but she won't be. Okay. Verification of meeting notice, Ms. Womack.
The agenda was posted in City Hall and on the portal on June 5th. And notification was sent out to the subscribers on June 5th.
Okay. Thank you. We have one set of minutes that was sent out, and that was for the March meeting, was it? March 8th meeting? Regular meeting, March 8th. I've read them. Everybody else has read them. Bunky isn't here to sign it, but any corrections or changes to that? If not, I'll have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Motion to accept the minutes from the regular meeting on March 8th, 2019. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? And we'll go on. Thank you. Any correspondence, Ann? That's nothing? Okay, very good. We had a beginning of a sketch review. I believe it was in April. My mind is a little bit foggy. I think it was April. And request to continue that sketch review. And I'm not sure whether Peter's going to, who's going to wave their arms today? Okay. You can use that microphone, you can use the podium.
My name is Hal Dukes with a law firm of Tull and Razor.
Okay,
and,
thank you.
I grew up here in Rehoboth. Most of you guys know. You see me around. The facts are that I represent the owners and developers of this site.
You want to get a little closer to the
And
microphone?
the goal today is more asking you for help in this matter so you can give your suggestions and thoughts on this. The plans are to go ahead and take your suggestions and thoughts and then put it together so a presentation can be made to the Board of Adjustment on things that need to be adjusted. The goal here is to try to educate everybody as to the need for an upgrade in the planning of, it would normally be allowed by your zoning code because we think the code itself is somewhat limiting for a high-quality hotel operation like we have planned. My clients have sacrificed a lot of square footage and rooms in order to upgrade this, and rather than have a monolithic structure that would provide probably more income initially, but they think in the long run it would not be helpful to the town because they want a higher quality product and attract higher quality people to the area. The way we have this planned is Mr. Papajohn will make an introduction, and then in order to help with the understand the presentation here, we've engaged Mr. Siegel, who is one of the top hotel people in the United States. We're very proud of him. He's got a number of projects under management, and he is going to go and explain to you the trend in the hotel business and what's happened to other areas like in New Jersey where they've had a limitation on certain structures, and that has resulted in the deterioration of the town, like Asbury Park and some of those places. And then we're going to have our architect go over the details. And then we have Ms. Frederick, who was the former building inspector here in Rehoboth, go over the details and the ins and outs of the code. So in that regard, I'll introduce Mr. Papachon.
I'll try and keep this as short as possible. As I mentioned in our first meeting, you know, I've been here since 5-year-old kid in 1938. And interestingly, I don't know if any of you have seen the brochures or heard about it, but 2 Saturdays ago, we had a reunion of all the Rehoboth people. That went to Rehoboth High School from 1939 to 1969 when they opened up Cape Henlopen. The reason I'm a little bit emotional about it is I saw so many people there that I went to school with as a little kid. We didn't recognize ourselves or nothing, but it was a wonderful reunion at the high school, and now they're knocking it down. Gosh, they put up Cape Henlopen, and they had to knock that down, from what I understand, and our building there looks as nice as ever. But I understand the economics of it, I guess. The pipes get old, air conditioning can't be put in, it becomes too expensive to try and redo an old building. And of course, we ran into that with Belhaven, which wasn't as nearly well constructed from a masonry standpoint. It was well done by the carpenters of the time, who built 12-inch rafters, roof rafters, 12 inches apart, real 2x6s, not theoretical 2x6s, and real 2x4s. And when the storm hit, for example, in 1962, and most of us weren't even worried about it because it was just a simple northeaster, but it just sat there like a washing machine, advancing each high tide, and that's why the building crumbled, because there was no foundation below the actual line to keep it up. And it fell 40 feet back, and 3 stories above it were holding up the rest of that part just by itself. That's how they built those days. So that's why it becomes economically infeasible to keep what you have, and it has to be torn down. Now, what we tried to do at the beginning, Alex and I talked about this several years ago and said, well, we don't know enough about what the code requires and FAR ratios and land ratios and what size of the building. We knew it was approximately 4 stories. Height was a limitation, so that's why we hired all the experts. But we felt one thing probably was most controlling at the time when we looked at it is how many parking spaces can we get on that place? So that means that's how many units you can put on the property to maximize the return. So came out with somewhere between 121 to 125 parking spaces. Now, we said to the architect, well, go ahead, see what we can do on this thing based on the code, and put in the same number of units that you can get parking spaces for. And he did in that first rendering you got, which appeared in the newspaper and all. It had all those units in it to adhere to what the parking code required. But when Alex and I looked at it and spoke about it to the architect and others and said, you know, there's an awful lot of small rooms in this thing, 250 square feet and all that. And we finally decided that is not the way to go for our property. Number one, we want to be proud of it as a family, as a heritage thing, from our own standpoint. But the problem is economics dictate if you're really going to take care of opportunity cost, which means this has the potential to bring so much income in. So what do you minimize your investment in order to maximize your return? Well, to put in a minimum place would have been what we first said. Well, let's put in 100 and some odd units, 25, if we can get them in there, even if they're small, because it's going to run high 20 millions to low 30 millions in cost, depending on how you decorate it. But if you're going to want to do a nice place and provide good-sized rooms, 300, 350 feet, 400 feet in some instances, to make it attractive for people to come in, that they're not renting an oversized closet, in my opinion, we got to have fewer units. Well, what's that mean, though? It means if you're going to do that and reduce your potential income, you're going to be spending all the money that you would have spent buying the land, theoretically, because we are now saving the money in a sense, because we didn't have to buy the land. So now we want to do it in a way that we as a family can be proud of it, and the city and the residents can be proud of it. So we asked the architect to come back and drop the number of units so we can get larger rooms in it. And that way, we would be able to spend the money that we theoretically, quote, saved in not having to buy the property and spend it on the exterior and on the design of the interior rooms to really make them, what you might refer to in a general sense, nice and attractive. So that's why we've come back with a plan that comes in at around, I think it's 110 or 112. I haven't even looked at the number of rooms, but I think it's right there. So that means there's at least 12 to 14 additional parking spaces left empty, which the tenants can use, because we want the tenants to come back that are there now. And also, if possible, and I have no idea about this at all, whether in the shoulder seasons, when there isn't that much business, whether it become available to rent spaces at a decent price to people who come in to get the traffic off the streets and provide some parking spaces, which basically would be, I think, a benefit to the town to get as many cars off-street parking than always having to rely on the street parking. So that's where we are. Now, I got involved with the Historical Society about 10 to 12 years ago, and donated some funds to them to help them out and hope that they can, and they've used it wisely. I think they've done a good job in there. And so that feeling I want to carry over, and Alex does, into this property so that we as a family and the city can be proud of having something that they can look at. Because truly, what bothers me for the long run, and I'm not going to be here, I'm sure, is the long-term viability of the Rehoboth Avenue, Baltimore Avenue, Wilmington Avenue commercial area to make it something that metamorphosizes into something that the city and the residents could look at and say, well, it isn't exactly what I would like, but it's a heck of a lot better than what it was. Now, this might be a 50-year project, because something I got to give you as an aside. 25 or 30 years ago, I forget, Hal may remember, there was a meeting before the Board of Commissioners, and people were talking about they didn't want anything to change in Rehoboth and all that, and that's fine. But they said, we love the ambiance of Rehoboth. And I said, well, we like listening to people. We love being here. It's a small town. Heck, I was raised in it. Who wouldn't like to go back to the 1940s and even 30s? But we can't. So the point I'm emphasizing is, when we get into this area of trying to do something for the town, not everybody will agree with what you're trying to do. We know that. It's human nature. But our emphasis and impetus and desire is to do something that at least sets an example, hopefully. I don't know how much of an example, but that if other property owners are allowed to do things with their property, whether it's a C1 or C2, whatever the zoning number is, to put in something that's attractive, that keeps the people coming in town, that are the customers that you would want, the people that you want to come in town. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Rehoboth has gotten a reputation for being a restaurant, a merely good, almost gourmet restaurant town. I've got people I know in the Washington area that live in Bethany and all that. When they want to go out and eat, they come up here. Now, obviously, they're going to come during the shoulder seasons. They don't want to fight that traffic. That's another situation. But, well, the Millsboro Road Okay, 24, 9, 16, same roads when I was in high school, when I used to look out for the state troopers. But anyway, they've put some shoulders in and bike trails and all, but they're single-lane roads, and they become parking lots. And I'm thinking that maybe enough people are going to move in to the outer suburbs here east of, or west of Rehoboth towards Milton and heading towards Georgetown and the Millsboro Road, that they're going to demand finally that the State Highway Department dualize those roads so people don't go out there and get in a giant parking lot. Now, I've gone off trail a little bit here, but if you want to see a place improve, you've got to try something different. And that's what we're trying to do. But what we're really saying is we're going to be spending millions of dollars more than if we just decided, okay, low investment, let's go with what Wyndham has ownership in this country, the Knights Inn and Motel 6s, jam as many units as you're allowed legally to get in there and forget about it. And that way you're maximizing your return. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it to a situation where it is at least economically justified in our own mind, but we're not being totally silly about wanting to do something and spend just millions of dollars, which has no real effect on the bottom line or in a way that the city can be proud of. So that's why part of the proposal asks that we get a variance to be able to use the rooftop, no living space. I'm adamantly opposed to that. I want to stay as close as we can, theoretically, to the 40 or 42-foot limit, but to have an opportunity to be able to provide a facility there that caters to special occasions, weddings, anniversaries, and all these kinds of things, birthday parties, and would be really there for the benefit of the local people, because they're the ones that are going to be scheduling weddings, not in the middle of the summer. They'd be scheduling for September all the way through May. That's when we would like to be able to have that, where they can meet up there, have their party, have their get-together, family to-dos. And that's what we used to do when I was in, and this is sort of a replication of what we did when I was a kid. And I'd be walking around like a 10 or 11-year-old kid with a tray of Coca-Colas and this and that, and even some liquor served to the Republican Committee for Sussex County, the Democrat Committee for Sussex County, Kiwanis, whoever it was. They were held here at the hotel with a view over the ocean, but it was a second floor. We called it the sunroom because it had so many windows around it, and the sun came in there. So that's what we would like to do on the roof. And my only question to you and anybody that I talk to is, what is hurt if the Langfords or we or anybody else that has what you might call a high-rise motel, 4 stories, whatever it is, to have being able to do this, to be able to provide a service on the roof? Who's hurt? There are no views that you're talking about being blocked. There's no shadow on the beach. There's no canyon effect because you have a little party or something up on the roof. So that's why we're asking to have a variance, to be able to use it. You might say, well, they're going to use it. Well, if they're going to be, the pool is going to be down there on the second floor towards the rear of the property, down Wilmington Avenue. If they want to be around a pool, they're going to be down there anyway. The only reason they might go upstairs is they want to just put a lawn chair on the roof and sun themselves. Well, it's going to have air conditioning units up there anyway, so I don't see what is harmed, or the zoning ordinance is so harmed if we're able to do that. So that's where I am. If you have any questions, glad to try and answer them.
I guess there's going to be a presentation too. You're going to go through.
Right, yeah, well, mine was long-winded, but I hope helpful.
That was great. Thank you.
Okay.
This is our showtime here.
Yeah, right. Good afternoon. My name is Ben Seidel. I'm the founder and president of Real Hospitality Group. We're a nationwide hospitality operating and owning company.
Want to spell your name for me?
Sure. S as in Sam, E-I, D as in David, E-L. And my company? Real, R-E-A-L, Hospitality Group. We're fairly new. We're only 9 years old. We just turned 9 last year, but we just ranked 15th largest in the country doing what we're doing, and proud to say we're based here in Ocean City, Maryland. So we do have offices in Fort Lauderdale. We have an office on Wall Street in New York because we have a large presence there. But we also have, I think it's 18 properties here up and down the Delmarva Peninsula. I'm here because we were awarded the contract to operate the hotel once it's open after about a year and a half. I guess it was about a year and a half long search that the Papa John's did for an operator. And myself and my company came out on top. So we're looking real forward to this. We have the property in Bethany, the Bethany Beach Ocean Suites. We developed that with the developer there. We have the Fairfield here. We're building the Residence Inn here, the Home 2 Suites in Lewis, the Holiday Inn Express. We have quite a bit of presence here. But this project, we went after real hard because of the location of it is probably one of the more prevalent locations along the eastern seaboard, certainly here in Rehoboth Beach. And we've seen the results of, if you build the right thing, the demographic that you can draw is not only the upper scale demographic that's going to pay and spend their money in the local market, but they're going to return. When I looked at the original plans, and I'm not a zoning expert or don't know building codes or anything close to those, all we did was suggest kind of ideas for branding, whether it's independent or part of a major chain. Personally, I don't think that the city of Rehoboth needs another cookie cutter Fairfield or Courtyard or Hilton or Hampton, or we have a lot of those, but to do something kind of totally different that appeases to that upper demographic that's coming to the restaurants, and what you said is true, being from Ocean City, you want to go out to eat, you come up here. And so there's discussions that are ongoing with my team and the developers team about is this branded, is it independent? And now I think we haven't finalized it yet, but I think we're all leaning towards soft branding, which is being a part of Marriott, Hilton, or Hyatt, but not being one of their core brands, but being the Belhaven Hotel, an autograph by Marriott, or a canopy by Hilton, or a tribute by Marriott, one of those. So we have the sophistication and the prominence of being part of an international chain, but with the flexibility of telling the local story, of being the hotspot with history and telling a story about not only where you're staying, but where you are. The demographic that we're targeting, and like Bethany Beach is a good kind of model for this, because that's kind of soft branded. It's called the Bethany Beach Ocean Suites, a Marriott Residence Inn. Since that was built, there's other soft brand opportunities that aren't affiliated with a specific core brand within a hotel company. Tribute, Canopy, Tapestry, those are independent hotels with your own name, with your own location, but affiliated. So you have access to the reservation system, the frequent stay program, and all of the global marketing that comes from a brand. Of course, you pay dearly for that, but then you maintain the character of your individuality and of your city. Our marketing is to this demographic is coming from not postcards and phone calls, but Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and it's real time. And what I brought to the table with Peter Follett, the Papa John's, and the planning was, you've got to differentiate yourself from the cookie cutter hotel. The person that's coming to the shore is coming for an outdoor experience. They're not going to an urban museum or play vacation, or certainly to a casino, but they're coming to the shore. So the better connection that you can have, especially with this location, to the boardwalk, to people that are coming here, to obviously the ocean and the open air, I thought it was impeccably important to adopt the amenities that this traveler is looking for. Certainly an event space, that is been a salvation for all of our hotels that we manage here, Even the Fairfield up on Route 1 has a 1,200-foot ballroom that keeps that machine moving throughout the off-season and does very respectable and has a great reputation, not only here locally, but it's in the top, in the top 10% of Marriott's guest service delivery because of the perception that our people have there. Same thing at Bethany Beach. So we brought some of those ideas that worked, left the ideas that didn't work to our seat at the table with the design, and I think the result of where we are today is what Peter's going to show you in his presentation. And then, of course, up to you folks to decide, is that legal here, or does it have to be amended? And that's been our role into this. We currently operate 106 properties throughout the United States, from LA to New York, from Syracuse to South Beach, but we're based in Ocean City, Maryland, with, like I said, about 18 properties up and down the coast here. That's a lot. Questions?
No, I'm sure we will have some. Maybe one thing you want to think about, this would be a first, I believe, for Rehoboth. And Rehoboth, historically, going back 20, 25, 30 years, has in fact formed its code specifically around keeping national brands out of the city for a purpose of trying to keep a sense of local community, local ownership, et cetera. And that's why you don't see it in the restaurants. You don't see it in the hotels yet, okay? And so I guess to all of us and to the residents of the city, that would be a question of something new. What does it mean? What's the implication? Probably one of the biggest implications, and I would ask you to either think about it or respond, is when you have local ownership and local operating, you have local response. And so if there are problems, you have someone to talk to and someone that can respond locally. How does this work when it's a branded national brand? I think there would be great concern about if we didn't have that kind of quick response. So I don't know if you're prepared to address that thought.
I think it's a great question, which is exactly why we proposed what we propose, if in fact we align with a brand at all. To put the big M or the big H or the big W out, the big Holiday Inn or anything like that out on the streets here, I agree 110% with you. When I was a kid, I stayed at the Belhaven with my parents. I don't really remember it, I was that young, but when I saw the postcard, it brought back memories of my job as a busboy at the Avenue restaurant years and years ago. And I wholly agree with that. The idea of soft branding is that Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt don't appear anywhere on the building. It's only a part of the booking system and a part of the frequent stay program. In fact, my seat at the table with Peter is, how do you get the greens back in that the Belhaven was? How do you put the windows back where the Belhaven had the windows? Because that was the character of that block. On the boardwalk on Rehoboth, between Rehoboth and Wilmington. So if we were to decide to go that way, it would be for two reasons. Number one would be the shoulder and off season, the push that you get from the marketing support and the reservation support. And the second would be obviously for loan financing. It's a lot easier to find terms and lenders that are willing to put their investment committees behind a national brand and the support behind it than it would be just a standalone independent. But if you look at infamous properties like the Essex House in New York or the Olive in South Beach, if you look at the Palm Coast in South Beach, those are all part of a major chain, but you don't know that unless you're a frequent card member and somebody is marketing to you. And of course you can collect points, which is the big one, or of course the ease of the reservation system so that you can book. If you're shopping a local market, you have that prominence in your placement on online booking channels because of that affiliation, but it would still be the Belhaven, not buy anything, just the Belhaven. And that's why we suggested that. The alternative obviously is an independent, and I would go that way before I would ever suggest putting the national brand as the destination marker here, if that answers your question.
Not quite, but it's a start. In an investment like this, so many times the builders, developers are in it for a short term, several years, with the end result of spinning it off to someone else for its long-term operation. Talk a little bit about what the intent is here.
Well, I'm not an investor. I'm only an operator. I would be paid a fee for operating the property on a day-to-day basis. So when you build a hotel, typically you hire a professional operator that's certified through the American Hotel and Lodging Association, and if it's branded, with a contract with that brand. Also on financing, the operator will sign what's called a subordination agreement with the lender so that our reporting and the safety net of how we operate the hotel is controlled by the equity, all the equity players, including the lender. As far as the exit strategy for this developer, we, as part of the RFP process, the request for proposals, the request for qualifications first, and through the interview process, obviously we as the operator need to know what the motive of the developer is, because you're right. Hotels have become commoditized and they're part of a real estate class, and real estate is bought and sold for profit. And it makes a difference in how we operate the hotel. If you're going to invest in it just to flip it, then that changes the way we operate it. Very short term, running it extremely lean, making sure that the bottom line, so the multiple that you can sell it for and list it for, is optimized. Or over the long term, where your concern is returning visitors, positive comments, TripAdvisor top rankings, and then in it for long-term value creation. They explained to me that this was the latter, that this is the long-term valuation, but that question would have to be asked of the developer. When we operate, our agreement terminates if the property transitions.
What's your view of the viability of an investment of something like this? If, let's say, the beach, which is the business we're in, okay, is 50% or 75% reduced in terms of people that can be on the beach. I'm trying to address the true impact of sea level rise and what is likely to happen in the reasonable lifetime future of some people in this room, not everybody in this room, but it's certainly within the lifetime of some people in this room, is that the beach will no longer be there. And there may be a need for the beach to be 100 feet further west, which is exactly where the hotel is.
Well, that is a concern. Thank God for the Department of, what do they call it, Civil Engineers and Army Corps of Engineers. But I don't know that I would have considered what would happen if. I take a look at if that were to happen, other folks would have much bigger problems than what happens to the asset. What I focused on, kind of to the same point that you're making, Mr. Mullen, but a little bit different to the owner, was when I talked about you guys behind your back, when we talk about the city, is with this location, right with the bandstand there, the entryway to the town, you're only going to have one chance to get this right. And so what is the best physical amenity provided service billboard that you can put out for your city? So what you bring up is a concern that we all have throughout any coastal property, but I haven't focused on what would we do if. I think that the amenities they're provided and what you're going to see does a lot toward making this a relevant asset for lodging and for the city on a year-round basis. I mean, if you look at, just not to keep mentioning one, but if you look at, say, Bethany Beach Ocean Suites, with a combination of that restaurant and with a bar with access right off the boardwalk, you have those amenities to keep that upper echelon crowd. You look at the cars in a parking lot and you see what I'm talking about. But with that meeting and ballroom, to solicit the association base of the state of Delaware that always stays in the Wilmington, Newark, Dover market and say, now we've provided you with this, we'd like to get you on the rotation. And that's why you've seen Municipal Clerks Association, Delaware CPA Association, all now coming to Sussex County. This is a neat alternative to that, especially with the, if we can, the elevated views of the meeting space, and if there's a food and beverage amenity space there. Again, a picture says 1,000 words, so those Instagram, those Snapchat photos, they go real time, and that lures people to a market, and it can be immediate. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm a little worried about losing the beach here and spending this kind of money to build a hotel on a beach that you're going to take away, but
Well, it's a subject we're interested in. because
we
it
are in Ocean City.
Obviously impacts not only the Belhaven, but other things along the boardwalk.
Exactly, exactly.
I hear you say that it's possible it might remain independent. I mean, I see on your site where you've got a number of, Marriott and True Hilton and some others, and then there's a category of independent. So that is still within the realm of possibility that it would be that it wouldn't be branded one of the chain, but it would just be something you would manage independently?
Yeah, but if you're looking at, you said you're looking at our site.
was, yeah,
There's a
briefly,
couple of
yeah.
hotels that are on there that you think are independent, but they are affiliated with a brand.
Okay.
But you
You
would
never
never know
know
that
that,
by
right.
looking
Yeah,
at that.
yeah.
So the choices that we've talked about is either soft branding or complete independent.
Mm-hmm.
The benefits to a complete independent property is that you can close it down in the off-season if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would kind of be a disaster to
Oh,
have this location and put a close sign on the front door.
Yeah.
The retailers are staying open all year.
Right.
I mean, we had one of our first meetings in January, and we lunch at Grotto's. It's kind of neat.
Right, yeah. Because, I'm kind of aware of it. During my many years of business travel, I would try to stay in sort of groups of hotels that they were collected within a group, like Preferred, I think was one, and they weren't a brand, but they were a collection. And, and I think there's a lot of that. But I also see the chains kind of, I guess because of competition, maybe even from short-term rentals, the chains are trying to be more and more boutique. And Marriott is even getting into the short-term rental business, which just blows me away.
That's brand new. You're very up to speed, yes.
So, it's sort of interesting to see where this all fits in,
The benefit that you have with them is the people that redeem their points. I'm close. I'm not, but during the summer months in Bethany Beach, the occupancy there is probably close to 60% of the occupancy are just people redeeming points, and I really like that. As a local person in Ocean City, it's the same thing there too, at the Courtyard, at the Hilton, and I live in a place where people all over the country want to come, and they're taking those value points and redeeming them to where I live. So there is a huge sense of pride that kind of goes into that as far as the operator goes, because this is my home as well. And that's all part of the lure of making this successful. These people are here redeeming their points, so their rooms are on points, and that means the dispensable income of the upper echelon that have these points to begin with in food and beverage and shopping, amenities and entertainment. And you can see the neighborhood communities are reaping from that. And I don't think anybody's got near, all these properties I just mentioned have near this location. This will be a home run for this city. I have 40 years of experience next week, and
More of it, right?
is that it? I want to run away from him.
Peter?
Okay. I think it was Rick who said, "What's your wish list?" So here's our wish list. I doodly numbered and put a table of contents in for the chairman, and I told me he was not unhappy. So I think I did a good job there. Just take you back to the quick view of what once was and our kind of inspiration for what we would like to be. And that is, a building that is a beautiful white structure with some fantastic green roofs and some architectural embellishments, finials and smokestacks. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Hold on. It's another old image of the Belhaven from the boardwalk, both in color and then in black and white in the lower level, lower left-hand corner. And it's actually the photograph of the storm, where you can see the Belhaven over here is no longer, or at least a majority of it is, or the main portion of it is no longer. And then I want to just go back to our kind of inspiration, the kind of classical inspired grand hotels that have been built with contemporary materials and contemporary demands of the upper end traveler. And, you know, Disney World is a great place to have those kind of facilities. These are much bigger, but, you know, this is a great shot of the lobby. This could be our Belhaven someday. The building behind it is a little bit larger than what our Belhaven could be. These are probably, you know, 700 to 1,000 room properties. Really interesting, these buildings, they have this architectural character, and, you know, the idea of the masses of the roofs are sloped, they have a color, there are finials, there are cupolas, there are balconies, and all of this kind of stuff is the architecture that was, actually, these buildings were inspired by the Belhaven. They just didn't know it, right? Our site, just want to go through just real quick the site, and then I'll go into the floor plans. Here's our site. It's a kind of a zigzaggy site. It meets the corner of the boardwalk and Rehoboth Avenue here, and then it is along Wilmington Avenue, just a half of a block or half of a building off of the boardwalk in this location here. Just a quick roof plan. It's part of the requirements, and we'll get into the floor plans here. So what we were able to do is develop maximize the parking. As we've talked about, there's 110 spaces below grade, but thanks to our forward-thinking attorney, we've shown where scooter parking can be and where bicycle parking can be. And so it's not just a parking garage for cars, it's for alternative means of transportation. And so underneath the ramp here, this is the entry ramp. That's a good spot for bicycle parking. Adjacent to these stairwells, we have enough space to put some little bit of scooter parking and that kind of stuff. So, and who knows what they'll invent next? Maybe motorized surfboards. The ground floor plan, we have we've listened to the former fire marshal, and we've shown how all of the staircases that come out of the building have direct access to the outside. So they no longer go through the lobby space. This is an exit here. This is the other exit from the top of the building here. This is an exit from the parking garage. This is an exit from the parking garage over here. We've shown the retail tenants as they exist today, going back into the space, candy kitchen, ice cream store, the tea company, and grottos in this location here. All of these buildings currently are front-loaded, and so they would remain front-loaded. We've got another 14 spaces in this area over here, which is sort of covered, and that's how we get to 124 parking spaces. There's a couple of handicap parking spaces right next to the porte cochere, and the entrance to the parking garage is over here off of Wilmington Avenue. That's the entrance and exit to the below-grade parking. The restaurant for the hotel will be kind of in the middle. This is the entrance, the porte cochere is here, and the restaurant of the hotel will be sort of in the middle of the lobby, and then it will go towards the Rehoboth Avenue, and actually have a little piece of the storefront on Rehoboth Avenue. It sort of activates the whole through block experience. And it's to be determined whether grottos will connect directly into our lobby or not. It's just something we're not showing at this point, but this is sort of the hotel, restaurant, and bar here. We've put a little skylight here, so there's some natural light in the middle of it. We'll make that into some kind of a courtyard. We have not really gotten into interior design. We're just kind of putting spaces and places in place. Off of the front entrance is the front desk, and it's not uncommon to have the hotel experience happen. This is all open, even though it's sort of drawn as lines in different colors. And then the elevators for the hotels are here. This is the kitchen, this is the restrooms, and that's all the sort of administrative space back here.
Question?
Yes.
You talked about grottos potentially having access to the inside of the hotel. What about the other stores?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, this retail here on the corner here, this is the sort of the, for lack of a better term, public way. So maybe this retail could have some access here. We're not sure what that is. And it may be in the long run that these two flip-flop. But their idea is that these other stores, Candy Kitchen and the ice cream place, it would be difficult for these stores all the way on the corner to have access through the lab. So we're not going to create some kind of a mini mall that goes through this space here. We're just going to keep our access through here. This retail tenant could probably, and depending on what it ends up being, if it's a retail, it could be another restaurant, a restaurant type tenant. Grab and go or whatever. Our building, the lot coverage is in conformance on this level, and Susan is going to dive into that. So I want to go to the second level and talk about, at one point we had talked about having a continuous public way along the outside of the level and the second level porch. That's gone away. There was a practicality of that didn't quite work out. But we do have a couple of spaces. So the majority of the second level terraces are private, but there are a couple of them that will be open to the public. So this corner here, that would be sort of not open to public, but open, not private to the room. In other words, it could be something that could be rented. It may be actually something that general public use can use. There's an access to it here. The same thing happens on this corner of the building here. There is a way to connect this space to the interior via the corridor, or also coming along the edge of the building here and then over to the pool terrace. We've located the pool terrace along Wilmington Avenue, and we're actually thinking of making this like an infinity edge pool.
It looks that way in the picture.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wondered if it was an infinity pool.
So the idea is that it'll be an infinity edge pool that will be uplit, so you drive sort of into the pool. Now, the other part of this is the pool is not over the enclosed space of the building. So Mr. Papajohn said, Peter, I do not want to have any leaks in the lobby. So let me go back if I can here. You can see that the pool actually sits right over top of the porte cochere. So there's no enclosed space underneath the pool. So it kills a couple birds with one stone. It's the bottom line is he's much smarter than us, so we just listen to him. The ballroom space is located here. It's a 3,000 square foot ballroom. This is part of our wish list. There's 110 rooms and 125 parking spaces. The rooms are larger. So the second part of our wish list is that we grow the FAR to accommodate the larger, more luxurious rooms. The second part of our wish list is that we grow the FAR to accommodate the ballroom. The third part of our wish list is that we do not include balconies and terraces in FAR, okay? So it's the FAR that we're proposing in this project is 2.47, and that's above 2. But all of the FAR is for interior space, okay? It doesn't include any rooftop terraces, it doesn't include the pool, and that is like a sort of a normal way of the way FAR is counted in many other jurisdictions. And so it's not unusual that balconies and terraces and pools are not included in FAR. So it's not a strange thing for us to have that happen. But, so there's our wish list, is to have the ballroom here and to have the terraces and the larger rooms. Another wish list item are balconies. And this is the typical floor plan here. And you can see all these balconies. They're nice balconies. They're 6 foot deep. They're 11 feet wide. They have really beautiful, spacious, independent. Each one is independent. They're not all connected, so they will feel like Juliet balconies, but they will be large enough that people could sit out and truly enjoy them. The corners of the buildings have a wraparound balcony. So this room here has a wraparound balcony, and the rooms range in size from about 350 on the small side to around 455 square feet. Actually, this one over here is 537. So there's some really big ones, but most of the corners are the biggest ones, and we feel like that'll satisfy the luxury clientele that the hotel is truly trying to aspire to.
I have a question on,
Yes, sir.
near room 30, where you see the steps. Does that connect down to the first level or only second level up? Because when I was looking at the two drawings, I couldn't figure out. It appeared that it did not.
Which room? 30?
Near room 30, look at the stairwell.
Yep.
Does that communicate down to the first floor or only
Yeah.
go to the upper floor?
No, down to the first floor.
Because when you look at the drawing of the first floor, it seems to end up,
To the left.
is
I'm
that
sorry.
where it is?
I'll get it to go. I'll show you how it connects.
Okay.
So what happens is that stair, because this is a taller space, it runs over top of this corridor, right? This is,
Oh, okay.
it connects right there. That's this staircase. It goes up and it connects directly into that stair. Sorry. On the upper level of the building is another little articulation here. There are balconies. This is the only place where there are shared balconies, and we did this to articulate this edge of the building and make this little piece of the building feel 3 stories as opposed to 4 stories. And you can see that the building steps back along Rehoboth Avenue, along the boardwalk, between us and the building adjacent to it, a lot adjacent to us, between us and a lot adjacent to us on Wilmington. And then there's a large setback off of Wilmington Avenue because that's where the pool is. Right? I want to go back a minute. We pulled the ballroom out so that this ballroom will be divisible in 3. There will be a divisible here, there'll be another, and it'll be 2 in a larger room here. This room will actually be able to see the water. So you'll be able to be in there, look over the pool terrace and see the ocean. So it should be, that's the reason why we did this, and it should be really spectacular.
Typically, if you've got a ballroom, you're probably serving food or bringing, how is that going to get there?
So that's a good question. This gray area here is the service corridor, okay? We'll actually double use this elevator right here. So this elevator, and if you're a ballroom guest, you'll push the button in these elevators and you won't go towards the guest rooms, you'll go towards the back.
Towards the back.
Yeah, and that's all, this orange is the guest circulation, and it also has access out to the terrace. Oh, sorry. And right across here, there will be a little cross of circulation here, and that will connect here, and the food will come through here. And all that gray is either storage, it's potentially a warming kitchen, and circulation, egress circulation. The second means of egress out of this ballroom is that staircase right there. And that staircase is the only staircase that you exit through the parking area below, but you do have direct access to the outside. Yeah. Went the wrong way. Okay, so our last wish list is the opportunity to use the roof as some kind of a hotel amenity space, a sun deck, call it whatever you'd like to call it. As a result of that, we have 3 options for doing this. The first option basically has a small enclosed space with a terrace and restrooms. And it's located kind of in the middle of the block, okay? So there's, this first option articulates 3 pavilions, 1, 2, 3, and a finial on top of each one. They are inspired from the big roof of the Belhaven, the historic Belhaven. And so this, we believe, is probably the most invisible of the roof terraces that we're showing you. And also we were thinking maybe that you could do something where you'd have a staircase coming up and wrap around the finial, so you could actually get up here, walk around the finial and look out and see the ocean. So it'd be kind of spectacular. And so this is a series of images that show what this looks like. And these are the same images. So the only thing you really see here, there's a little trellis space that covers part of that rooftop. And the elevator override, we decided to make something out of it and sort of make it sort of be the tallest of the pavilions. And then you see that there. So this is coming down Rehoboth Avenue, looking at the building. So there's the roof terrace here. As you can see, even though we're up in the air with these views, you do not see very much of the roof terrace. And these are the same images that we showed you previously, so you have an opportunity to see the apples to apples kind of view. So this is what we're calling option A, okay? So here you can see there's the roof terrace, there's the pool, there's the zero edge pool, and the roof, and the private roof terraces. Okay.
Is the building height in option A the same as the one you showed us last month?
Yeah, the building height is always 42 feet, okay, typically. We did not, we had a conversation about raising the building height in order to have a bigger, taller restaurant space, and we felt that that was too big of an ask. So our eave height is 42 feet.
But option C is taller than that.
Well, all of them are taller than that because they have the rooftop enclosure. Okay, so the mass of the building is always 42, but they all have a rooftop enclosure where it's taller.
And
okay?
that's an additional 15, right?
It's an
goes-
additional 15 because of the elevator override.
Okay.
And to use the rooftop, you need 2 means of egress. Am I
You
correct about
need
that?
2 means of egress.
Yeah,
Right. And they're shown on the plans. I'll show you the plan. Let me just blast all the way through this option, okay? So one of the thoughts we had after looking at option A was that, we have these, kind of cool roofs. Why don't we maybe occupy one of the roofs and make that the pavilion? And so we looked at an option where, rather than have a separate bump, in other words, another box out here, if we made one of these pavilions taller, and that's what we did in this option B, is we took the pavilion in this corner and we made that the place where it would be taller. And so there's the amenity space, there's the roof terrace, and the 2 elevators that connect to it. This is the way you get, there's one staircase that connects this way, and there's one staircase that connects, that you walk through the space, outdoor space to get to the elevator, the second stair. All right, so this looks like this. Sorry. Which, we thought this was really an interesting solution because it takes the tallest part of the building and moves it away from the beach, which if there was a concern about that, this would be successful. But what it does is it actually puts the height of the building right adjacent to our neighbor. So, you know, with one solution, there's another problem. So this is just walking around that alternative, and you can see that it's really, we really like this scheme. It makes a beautiful space out of the pavilion. And the second part of this design that's different than the previous solution is that we eliminated the second level structure, and we put a continuous enclosure or cover, not enclosure, cover over top of the sidewalk along the building's edge. And that was, the reason why we did it is we took the green sort of porch, the second level porch of the Belhaven, we put it down on the ground level. It was something that John felt was really important for us as a place of refuge during the rain and people getting out of the sun. And so this is, we felt was a good solution for that. And, you know, maybe it's a little bit too much of the same all the way around the building, but at least articulates the idea in a good way. And we feel it still has that, keeps that character. So you really have a roof here on the ground level or at the first floor that creates a nice human scale, pedestrian scale along the base of the building. You have nice balconies that are uncluttered above, and then the sort of character of the historic rooftop and the second level.
How much of an overhang?
6 feet.
6 feet?
Yeah.
And is that out over the sidewalk or just to the edge of the sidewalk and you've actually moved the building back in?
No, it's out over the sidewalk. Yeah. And we know that that's not a code allowed thing, but that's what existed, that's what the Belhaven had before. That's what existed before you had a code. And there's a reason why people did that, and it's called the sun, right? For some reason or another, somebody wrote something that said protecting people from the sun shouldn't be allowed anymore. Now, I don't know why that is, and maybe none of you all know how that is, but that's where we are. So this is just what we feel is the right way to do this. And Ms.
I just wanted to add, the overhang there, now, it's about 6 feet now. It's already there, it's been there for years.
Right, but it's non-conforming.
I understand that, but I mean, it's already there. I don't know if anybody's complained about it, I don't think so. Frankly, I was glad to see it for two reasons. One, in the umbrella business, people would run off the beach, but they wouldn't leave, because they could go stay under there until the thunderstorm came by, and then came back down and rented more umbrellas. That was one. And number two, the tenants say they appreciate it for the same reason, because it keeps people there rather than running back to their cars, creating a traffic jam and trying to leave town during a thunderstorm.
So this image here is kind of what we still consider our money shot. It does show you the double-step roof as kind of the way that the old Belhaven did as well. So, and we'll just keep going around here. It's, again, the roof here is relatively uncluttered. There is the elevator override. It's sort of separate than the pavilion, and it's anticipated that the pavilion would have been the main piece of the articulation of the design. So, you know, our wish list is to actually use the site for its strongest and most successful resolution. And so option C takes the pavilion and puts it kind of where it should be, and that is on the corner of Rehoboth and the boardwalk. What we did do, though, is we made the pavilion smaller than the footprint around it. So you can see that this square here is not as big as the full roof of this wing of the building. And so it's actually a smaller pavilion than the roof of the previous scheme, but it's also just a more logical kind of, it is like a turret, or it is like a little architectural embellishment. And then we also thought that, maybe what we could do is just take it off of this corner here and allow this part of the building to be a little better neighbor in terms of stepping up to the adjacent property. And so we have, and if you look at the way the old Belhaven was, the architecture at this end was really flat roof, just a simple, almost like an old townhouse building. And so we're kind of using that as the precedent for here. We did introduce the second pavilion roof along the entrance. We feel like it's iconic and it would be a great thing to have at the front door. So this is kind of the bigger roof like we showed on the previous schemes and a smaller roof over here. This is a indoor-outdoor connection between the elevator and the pavilion in that these, in the good weather, these will all open up and be almost like a covered pergola. And in cold weather, it'll be closed so that you don't get cold on your way out to the event space. And so this scheme is our scheme that we kind of are showing as the full wish list. And if you look, the building shows it's a 14-foot height building at the edge of the sidewalk. This shows you the 6-foot overhang here. The architectural character that we're trying to develop around the base is similar to the architectural character we're developing everywhere and sort of reminiscent or inspired by the Belhaven. This shows the roof coming, this ground level roof all along. This is the elevation of Rehoboth Avenue. There is the pavilion and the main finial in this location here. And you can see in this, at the top drawing, how the building does step back and sort of create this kind of, symmetrical, formal, but, really iconic solution to having a roof space on the project. The next drawing is showing the rear elevation. This is the elevation that's adjacent to the properties. And this is the elevator override. There's the pavilion in the background. This is the front pavilion, and that's the ballroom there. And then this is the strange elevation where it's actually cut in half, but it shows, this is the entrance. That's the front door is here. This is a cut line, so this is actually matches up with this over here. And we did this because there was a scale request in the requirement. But this is all great stuff, and we can show you. Here are the building sections, and again, this dimension here, where the flat roof is, and where this eave line is the 42-foot dimension. Okay, and the ground floor is a 12-foot clear. So we feel like, well, it's not the 16 or the 18 feet that we would like to have. We feel like we can still make this conform within the 42-foot height limitation and build a 4-story luxury hotel, okay? So the floor-to-floor height, the guest rooms will have a ceiling height of about 8'9". So it's a little bit more than 8 feet. It's not 9 feet, it's not 10 feet, but it's a little more luxurious. It should be a great room height for the proportion of the room. The ground floor space will have, again, a 12-foot to the underside of the slab. This is a concrete building, so it's a flat slab. And then the top floor actually has an extra 1.5 feet here, and that's because of mechanical and for the living roof and the waterproofing for the roof. The next slide, it's a really good diagram. It shows how the majority of the roof is 42 feet, and it shows how the building does step up and create this amenity space, architectural embellishment, and also the finial and the character of the old Belhaven. And then it shows how it steps back. This is the setback. There's the terrace for the guest room, and then this is actually the front. So all of this is sort of set way back off the street. This is the distance between the face of this and that is 15 feet. And the face of the building on the ground level and the face of the building on the guest room level is 15 feet. The enclosure of the amenity space is another 6 feet off of here, so it's set back 6 feet there. And we think it really ends up being pretty dynamic. And so here you have the view from the street, and the only real thing you see here is the pavilion space. This is the elevator override. You can start to see how the architecture starts to have different character. We may look at not having these as the green roofs here. We may look at moving this down. Again, and this is really kind of a preliminary design. We feel like we will make this much better by the time we're done. But it is the character of a white brick, white masonry, white structure with green roofs, and maybe a little bit of sticking on the top to make it a little more contemporary feeling. Here we are moving around the project. This is the connection between the elevator and the pavilion. That's a indoor-outdoor connection there. And coming around, you can see the way the building now really has a fantastic presence. It's it's definitely an iconic solution to the property. Okay. So now one of the things you guys asked me to show you was a shadow study. So if you,
Before you go to that question,
yep,
do the design heights that you're showing, do they accommodate the, quote, penalty for being in a floodplain?
they do not. They are at 0, right? The diagram, the discussion of the 1 and 1.1 foot up is something that Susan is going to address, but they do not. These drawings do not. They assume like 0 is 0, and 0 is 13, right?
12.9 or something like that. You have to be another foot because of the floodplain.
Yeah, so the way this building hits the street is really important. And we need to be able to make sure that people can walk in right off the street. And so whatever we need to do to make that happen is really important, because that's going to be the best guest experience, right? We don't really, so how we deal with that in the floodplain, maybe there's a change in elevation once you get in the building, 10 feet in the building. But in terms of flood control, we are proposing that in between each one of these openings, the way these openings will be designed, they'll be designed so that we can put movable flood barriers in between and lock them down, so that the building will be able to be a full dammed building to stop. And that wall will probably be much taller than 1 foot. It'll probably be like a 4-foot wall. And so the windows are all set back to allow that system to happen. And we did a building like this in the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and it's a pretty good solution. It's a solution that is mountable and demountable. Now, have they used it yet? No. How old is it? They put it in 3 years ago. So, but the big one hasn't hit lately, so.
But we're not the ones that call the shot on that. DENREC is.
That's right. And we'll work with them.
Okay.
That is a solution that was acceptable to the Army Corps in Baltimore, or the Army Corps office in Baltimore. Any other questions? We'll look at shadows. You want to look at shadows?
Yeah.
And we'll come back.
Well, what are we going to go to next?
Shadow.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll-
yeah,
I'll
go
hold
ahead.
my question.
Okay.
Oh, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I had a question with regard to building height, and it gets a little bit more detail, because we're constantly referring to 42 feet, but the net height of the building is 69.
Right. The gross height is 69.
Right. And I tried to look, I did a lot of research on this, and I got no guidance from looking at the American Institute of Architects website from the standpoint of what an embellishment is in a finial versus a structure. And my concern is that what you're showing, regardless of the quality of what it is, is that an awful lot of what you're describing as a finial and an embellishment is really a structure. And that creates I'm very interested from the standpoint of scale and mass and urban form.
Right, and that's our problem with the American Institute of Architects. They don't really answer the architect's questions. And I have the problem with that too.
Okay. Well, as I'm looking at it from the standpoint as a planner and the long range, and there's a lot of things that I really like about this, and particularly all the glass on the front, the eyes on the street, which is, from a planner perspective, is something that's very important and well done. I do have a concern, which that's why I said I'll hold it till a later discussion, that in our own code, the use of embellishment and finial versus structure, and that's an issue.
Right. So let me finish and we'll dive in. There'll be a lot of comments, but I want to finish the whole thing so you guys can, because I realize that this is a very in-depth conversation. So let me try to get this out of here. Okay. So I asked my guy to text me the days because it blacked out. Let's see if he did it. The first day is, what we did was we took 4 times of the day, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, okay? The first set of images is the 24th of May, okay? So this is 9 o'clock in the morning, and this is south here, okay? So east, west, north. Rehoboth Avenue is north, beach. See if it's gonna work here. Okay, so this is 12 o'clock, May 24th. This is 3 o'clock, May 24th. This is 6 o'clock, May 24th. Next day is June 29th, I think.
Can't be. June 29th? You mean?
May
May
29th,
29th. Okay, so 5 days later.
5 days later. 9 o'clock, noon. I'm sorry, 6 o'clock. O'clock. Sorry, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. This is June. June 24th or something, June 21st, somewhere around the solstice, right about now, okay? This is 9 a.m. This is 12. This is 3. And this is 6. So what you can see here is because the building steps back, like your requirements, your code actually works, right? So congratulations. And it does not affect the sun tanning part of the beach at all. The nature part of the beach, it affects a little bit. Yeah, June 21st. Boy, I'm glad that happened.
Today's the 14th.
Right.
So how could it, last year, June 21st?
No, it's the June 21st every year is this.
Oh, I see, okay.
It's just the longest day of the year.
Okay, I get it, okay.
It's the longest day of the year.
Longest day of
It's
the year.
solstice, and it's-
Well,
I
not,
said this time of year, I don't, it's practically, we're close, right? So this is the 19th of July, so I'm walking you all the way through the summer months, basically,
Yeah,
you know?
okay, I get
So you can at least see, this is 9 a.m., this is noon, this is 3. So you can see the way you guys have designed or required us to set the building back actually works. I mean, Rehoboth Avenue doesn't have a lot of shadow.
and this is the C design.
What?
This is the C.
This is our design. This is what we want to do. This is the C design. Yeah. So there's the finial right there and its effect. And then this is August. So this is like the end. This is like August 24th or something like that. Noon. 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So it's, during the days of summer, it's pretty, the way you have written the code works, okay? All right, so now for the really best part of this presentation. Are you excited? I'm excited. Yeah, you'll rent plenty of umbrellas. So we have the ability to do animations. A picture goes a long way, but 3D animations go a lot further. So this is it's a in-house deal. So I'm going to push it, pause. So we are now coming down Rehoboth Avenue, okay? This is Rehoboth Avenue, and down there is our hotel. So maybe this is the Candy Kitchen, I'm not really sure, okay? But we didn't, and this will get better, okay? Give us more time, we will fill this in. But this primarily deals with just our architecture and our building in the site. But this is, everything is to scale. This is really Rehoboth Avenue, and we'll talk a little bit about the beach in a minute, but.
Can I just interrupt you for a
Yes.
second? Can you explain the perspective? Is this a person in a car
No.
or a person on the street?
This is, you can see here's a tree, so we are probably about 20 feet off the ground.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Yeah,
know.
yeah, this is, we're gonna start at 20 feet over the ground, then we're gonna go up, okay? So it's like a low drone. And it's a pretty fast drone. Okay, so. I'm gonna stop it for a minute. We'll be able to run this a lot. So there you can start to see the restrooms. This is the little mall alley there. I'm just gonna let it run, okay? It's pretty exciting, so. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the sun is really right, and we can't move the sun to the north side of the building because this program doesn't let us do that. So it is a shaded-in building, and it's on the shaded side of the street, right? So here we are. There's the bandstand coming around to the beach. Here's our, everything is to scale. There's your beach control. Coming up Wilmington Avenue. There's our pool right at the entrance, porte cochere, our meeting space, pool terrace, living roof, entrance to parking, and we're gonna go back around, okay? Coming back, moving back. We've designed it so that people can go from the beach directly up into the pool terrace and then into the rooms. The modeler is from the Midwest. I don't know if he's ever been to a beach before, so the beach is lacking people. But he said it's the morning, so it's okay. So this, gives you an idea of the scale of the building, in the context. So we'll play it one more time just so you can see it. And we'll be able to, we'll post this online, and we're going to put more people on the beach now, and you'll be able to see this. But it's a super effective way to look at this. And
Did you say you're going to do a ground level as well? Or a walking level?
We'll try to do a ground level. I haven't been able to get them to do a ground level, but I can try.
Okay.
It doesn't, I don't know why, but, so there's the.
The perception of scale will be very different if you're a person walking down the street.
Completely true. We agree. I haven't gotten one yet, but I'll get one. We'll try it for you. So there's the ball, there's the bandstand, and porte cochere. We're going to get some sound in it too, so we'll have some music, and people playing, ocean crashing, get it, cars, people honking. It's a relatively simple program, so it's not quite as good as it could be, but it's pretty effective, I think.
What's happening now?
But,
We pull away, or
yeah, we're pulling away. Yeah, we're going back just to sort of see the scale of the building and the waterfront. Like there, you know, that's kind of, you know, if you're on the boat, you'll see the building and it's our, there's Rehoboth Avenue. All right, so I'm done. And Susan is going to wrap it up, and then we'll
Can I make an aesthetic comment?
Yeah,
Not to offend, but I think a repeat of the roof overhang that you have on the first level, on the third level, would dramatically improve the optics of the building and give you the opportunity of moving the cupola perhaps further west.
we're happy to look at things.
Because if you look at the building, you've created the green roof image on the ground level or on the first level. And then it's pretty stark going up. And I think if you saw a double level of green.
You know, I started to do that on one part of the building. I'll show you.
Wrapped around on the other side, I think.
Yeah, and also, what I was thinking about doing was adding, you'll see it in a second here. You see these awnings up here, right? So yeah, if we added, and I had them on this and then I took them off, you know? So it's a very similar, yeah. So let's see this, that piece of that roof there.
Yeah.
If we added them around this edge of this, it would soften it a lot.
Yeah.
And it would really make it more beautiful. And so we you know, that's definitely something we can look at in design.
I don't know the impact on code or
No,
things
it's
like that,
nothing, it's just
but
design.
it just seems to me it's
A little
stark.
blank up here. Yeah. We're happy to look at something like that.
And one other comment about the animation. It's really helpful in understanding what the design is. I'm having a hard time. I want to see,
Green.
well, yeah, green. But I want to see what a pedestrian and a person in a car sees. I mean,
Okay.
that's how everybody experiences it. And I took a note that said the ballroom would have a view in the ocean. But when I look at the animation, what you're showing, as it spins around right now, there's another floor and a ceiling. It doesn't look like there is a view of the ocean, unless I'm not understanding it.
Yeah, so it's coming around now. And you can see right there, oops, I'll stop it, stop. I don't think I can go backwards. No, there it is, right there. So that is the ballroom window right there, okay? That right there is the ballroom window.
Isn't it the top part of the ballroom window and not the floor?
No, it's the floor, that's the floor. That's
Oh,
that's
is it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you'll be able to see, it's floor to ceiling, you'll be able to see down Wilmington Avenue and see the ocean.
Oh,
Well,
As
depends
long
on
as the
what's built on
buildings in
corner.
front of it.
Well, no, even so, because this building that's built on the corner will have to set back as well. So, you know, there's the requirement of setbacks for the future development of this are the same as this building here. So this building will have to be set back 14 feet once it's above the ground floor. So, and that will still allow this window to have that view.
Well, out Wilmington,
necessarily.
out Wilmington.
Out
Avenue.
Wilmington Avenue,
Yeah,
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 absolutely,
out
yeah.
Wilmington
Yeah,
Avenue.
that's why we put it at there, you know, so you get that, it makes a lot of sense in a way. Okay.
I just want to clarify one thing too, that, you know, and I like the idea of what David suggested and you had thought about with the third green roof, but it's not actually a green roof. It is green in color for these, right?
It's not green
Actually, a
environmentally.
green and color roof.
No, what I'm saying is, because there's also a green roof, an environmental green roof, a little bit on the top, correct?
like to
So I'm
call
just trying to
those-
make the distinction
I like to
between
refer
color
those-
and environment.
I like to refer to those roofs as living roofs.
Okay, that's a good distinction.
Green roof, and especially in this building, you have to be careful because
Yes.
we do have living roofs, they're definitely flat.
Yes.
The green roofs are the green,
Or green,
either
yeah.
metal or shingle,
Okay,
depending on what.
just making that distinction. And so there is some living roof on the top, right?
Yes.
Do you know about how many square feet that is? Any idea?
I'm going to say that there's probably almost 10,000 square feet of living roof on this project, maybe more.
All on the top? How did you have that much on the top?
The building footprint is about
38, I guess, yeah.
38, I can tell you.
38,475.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right. Because I couldn't
Almost.
tell from the drawing, it looked like it was just a sort of a, a sliver around, the outsides. I just couldn't tell how much of an area that was compared to what was the deck up there. Yeah, okay.
Just one other aesthetic comment also. The periphery of the building all the way around is pretty much, vertical to the ground and flat with very little architectural indentation, et cetera. It would be nice if there was plantings or the ability to break that structure up and have some, quote, green plantings, trees, bushes, whatever, that would sort of break up the surface.
Absolutely.
Because again, it gives the impression just of
Especially
wall.
with this model, the animation really kind of dehumanizes the building somewhat. It's great in that you get to see the scale, but it's a little bit cold. Yeah, thank you. Susan.
Can I just say one more thing that I wanted to comment on? So the architectural inspirations, which I think are wonderful in this case, you're showing us huge developments on hundreds of acres with these embellishments. So I'm trying to say something about scale. It would be helpful and relevant if you had a few urban infill, very small lot development architectural inspirations that kind of bring it down to here. So, I think we can all agree that the pictures you sent have features that we're interested in, but those features are used in huge, massive scale, which we don't have the luxury of here. We just have a very fixed parcel. So things that you've done in more urban settings that reference how they were used in the urban settings, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, we agree. And we'll get there. We're just, basically it's like a big zoning diagram, but it's come to life.
Well, I think he was referring to where you showed other of your work.
I understand.
Actually, Jeff, I have a question very much related to that, and that is that after your last presentation, I was very impressed with some of those other hotels you showed. So I looked on your site to see all the hotels you've done, and they are all very unique and very stunning. I was quite impressed with it. But I noticed the text on the homepage said, in describing the unique approach, said if you have 12 acres or 12 floors, we can create a unique hotel for you. We have less than 1 acre and much less than 12 floors. So I guess my question would be, what is the smallest hotel you have done?
So from a lot point of view, 6,000 square feet,
Okay,
so substantially smaller
where is it?
in Washington, D.C.
Okay, all right, well, from a lot, no, I'm not just talking about lot. How many floors is that one?
It's tall.
Okay,
So
so maybe I should be looking at square footage then.
I did the Grand Cayman Hyatt, which is a
Okay.
4-story building.
Okay,
And 140 rooms. It's spread out a little bit bigger, but the footprint is similar to this. I almost think this is sort of an urbanized version of that.
okay.
I worked on a resort in Bear Creek, which is
Oh, it's in Pennsylvania, yes, saw that, yeah,
that's my building, and that's a 5-story building.
right.
And the Ocean City Marriott.
I just was going to ask about that one, yeah.
So that's a similar
Right.
size.
Right.
but totally different architecture.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I've been looking at this Courtyard Marriott in Ocean City, and it's 5 floors, right? It has balconies similar, I guess, to these. How tall is it? Do you know right offhand? Okay.
But it's, the volumes, those boxes on the corners,
Yeah.
they're pretty tall. Like, you know, they're probably 55 feet tall, you know. But the mass of the, I can find it, I'll answer.
Yeah, I'm just curious. And is there, I can't tell from the pictures here, does it have a rooftop? Anything a rooftop?
It's not, it was pre-rooftop phenomenon.
Pre-rooftop phenomenon, okay. Just,
If it were built today, it would definitely have one, believe me. But at that point, the market hadn't evolved into that happening for hotels. It would happen for there were still rooftop bars.
Right.
2-level bars.
okay.
I'd like to correct, maybe I got the wrong impression from your question, and that is about us being developers, so to speak, right? But we have zero interest in trying to spin this off to anyone 10 years down a trail, or as far as I'm concerned, and my son agrees, 30 years from now. We're doing it for the family and for the town. That's it. No development going out to try and play like I did when I first started investing in the stock market, playing the options game. Boy, it's a zoo. You don't stay in that very long and you stay healthy, no. So that's not our intention.
Thank you.
Hi.
Ms. Frederick?
Yes. We've heard a lot about our wish list today, and we know that we will have to go to the Board of Adjustment, and we believe that's our next step to clarify some of these issues. We need clarification on areas where our determination and reading of the code differs from Dom's a little bit, and we want to make sure that we get heard on that. I believe I mentioned it last time, that the definitions for gross floor area and FAR speak one way, and then in the second part of the code that talks about the numbers of that, it adds the word structure and speaks a different way. So we want to clarify these things. We also want to, which will clarify including certain things in the FAR, such as the balconies or the pool. And then we have to talk about the garage, which we went to the city in January and talked about it. I wrote a letter to Dom and asked for an opinion on whether that was in the FAR. And he discussed it with the city manager and the attorney, and I was told no, because it is well below the flood level, more than 4 feet. And we relied on that, and Dom has reread the code and believes now that it is going to be included. So we need to go and talk to the Board of Adjustment about these issues.
Can I interject something?
Sure.
I'm not sure that, we'll ask for maybe some discussion here, but I think there's something very fundamental here. I'm not convinced that the next step is the Board of Adjustment. I think you would be far better off starting somehow into the review process, okay, not the sketch review process, to get a sense from the Planning Commission of what they were willing to give, bend, et cetera, so that we could be supportive when you go to the Board of Adjustment. Going to the Board of Adjustment and just asking for variances is sort of a license to circumvent code. And I'm not convinced that the Board of Adjustment would be that helpful, because the rules on the Board of Adjustment basically are, and Glenn can help me with this, is they will look at they don't look kindly at self-inflicted problems, okay? And so it seems to me that a more logical process is to have a good, thorough discussion with the Planning Commission about the project, the give and take, if you say where we think it's logical to give or to extend things, and then go to the Board of Adjustment and say, this is what we want to do and with this support. You do it the other way, there can be problems.
I guess I was kind of hoping that we would get some indication from the Planning Commission through sketch plan of what they thought of the project. So, because I know that going into the next phase is extensive, and we want to make sure that we present it with things in place that are permissible. I mean, we know that our areas of height are over. We have a unique way of using the roof that we want to consider. We have the overhangs to consider, and we know that our FAR.
You have no open space.
No open space.
Yeah, the code calls for a hotel for 50% open space.
50% coverage, correct?
Coverage.
Yes, yes.
You're not close to that. So, and secondly, well, more importantly, we have not really heard yet from the building inspector.
Right.
Okay, so we've heard your version, okay, or Peter's version, okay, and your version. It just seems to me there's a process here that is related to planning before you go to the Board of Adjustment.
I think David makes a very good point, because we did that with another hotel owner a couple of years ago, where that hotel owner was able to go forward with recommendations where we, the planning board, said, it does not meet code, but this is a much better solution than meeting code.
Okay.
And in fact, that was granted.
Yeah, and I think the point is that in the site plan review, which is what we're really talking about,
Right.
Looks at a whole bunch of issues, okay, of the impact of this development, basically on the surroundings, not so much on the site itself. And I think the personal opinion is that we need to be able to go through that, or at least look at that to see what the potential problems are before you make decisions of saying, this is what we really want if we need variances. I realize that maybe one opinion and there may be other opinions, but I, as a planning commission person, I just think that that's the proper way of doing it. Is you get the support of the planning commission, you get a direction, you've given us a bunch of ideas on the design. We know that some of them are pushing the standards. And so you gotta, as a city, make a decision representing as many people as you can, that this is what the city wants to happen. And then you go in.
So what you're saying is that our next step should be the preliminary plan review.
Yeah, somehow we got to figure out how to do that, because historically, we've only done that for code compliant
Well,
designs.
that, I guess, was my,
But for Avenue Inn, we essentially, well, with Avenue Inn, it was a little different. With Avenue Inn, we did give them some feedback. They then worked with building and licensing to accommodate those design changes, and there was give and take. And then at that point, they were prepared, but they were a lot closer in terms of the numbers
Right,
than you
but-
are
but-
currently.
yeah, I realize what's here is asking quite a bit. I understand that, but, so, I was unsure that the planning commission could approve something if it was out of compliance. And that was my reasoning for, we were thinking, well, we'll make sure we have some compliance. You know, we may not get half of this, but we need to then present to you, knowing your comments from these meetings, something that you could get behind.
Yeah, our concern is a little bit on the other side. If you don't go through the discussions, the in-depth discussions with the planning commission and the concerns that a site plan review would unveil, okay? If you don't do that, and you go to the Board of Adjustment, and you ask for A, B, C, and D, and for whatever reason, they grant A, B, and D, and you come back, and then we discover that there are problems with that what do we do? Okay, then your argument is, hey, the Board of Adjustment gave us license to do this, you have to approve it. And it's a chicken and egg, somewhat of a chicken and egg deal. And to preserve the integrity, if you like, of the planning process, just seems to be that you spend some time with the Planning Commission to figure this out, because we all know that it doesn't meet code.
Right.
For a variety of reasons. And if we're going to bend the rules via the variance path, as opposed to changing the code, which is probably illogical for a single thing at this point in time. Just seems to me that you're better off having the support of the Planning Commission with a direction rather than the reverse process. Other people can join in. That's my opinion.
I respect that.
We were looking at the totality of it, whereas the Board of Adjustment would be looking, I suppose, at each individual code change.
Yeah, I mean, the Board of Adjustment will not consider, generally, as far as I can determine, they will not consider the breadth of the impact. They'll look at one thing that you asked for and they say, oh, okay, yay or nay.
I guess my understanding was that it was going to go to the Board of Adjustment, and the reasoning behind it was one single thing, was the industry has been changing over the years, and this hotel is trying to adapt a code that has not changed to the industry standards at this point, and we have trouble doing that. These are the things that we'd like to see to make a high-end hotel, and I think that everything is predicated on some determination of the reading of the code and some determination of variances all wrapped into that.
I think industry standards are a planning issue too, not just a variance issue.
Okay.
Yep.
Because again, they're sort of broad-based.
Glenn, you
Well,
want
that's why we're here. I mean,
We
when we come to you
I
first,
was
I
talking
understand.
about industry standards, because I guess I didn't know that industry standards had changed that dramatically. So I'd be interested in some evidence on that at some point. I mean, some research on that.
yeah, I think that's why we had Mr. Siegel here this time to talk to you about
Right,
things he had
yeah,
seen.
right.
I'm not trying to say that it's not a planning issue. I'm saying that we've brought it here, we've explained it, we know we've got things to figure out, and we were trying to work on those before we presented you with something that you couldn't approve. So it is that chicken and egg, I guess, and I thank you for your opinion on it. And
Yeah, I guess our concern is that technically the planning, and the Board of Adjustment has shown this, is that they'll focus on one particular fact, whatever you're challenging. They won't look at a project in total. I mean, that's not what they do. And so our concern is that you would get a variance on some aspect that then would have an impact, if you like, when we do the site plan review. And I just think you're better off having the support of the Planning Commission. You know, this is a tremendous project. It's a big project. It obviously has the potential for a great impact on the city. We need to make sure it gets done right. And Glenn, do you want to address? I mean, there are certain rules, that the Board of Adjustment basically has to follow in its variance granting.
I guess what I'll mention is Susan does this stuff all the time, so she certainly knows the exceptional practical difficulty standard that would be applied by the Board of Adjustment. That's not really news to her. What I will offer is that I think that in the Avenue Inn experience, they were further along, and I think that process, while it took a little bit of time, it did refine some things. I'm concerned now that if you were to go to the Board of Adjustment this soon, and I know it doesn't feel soon to you all because you've been living this for over a year, working through plans before you even came to us, but I think that I'd be fearful that if you went now, there would then be additional issues when your plans got a little bit more developed based upon those variances that Dom and you all might disagree with, and then it'd be another round of the Board of Adjustment. I would much rather see, sort of take a little bit more time, go to the Board of Adjustment once you've got whatever disagreements you have with Dom on numbers and code compliance issues, those are all refined and ready to go to the board. Whatever issues that the Planning Commission identifies as kind of, at this point, I don't know whether you like the sidewalk overhang. I don't know whether you like the different issues that would be, have to be dealt with from a code compliance perspective. I don't know enough yet to know what you're supportive of and what you're not. So I don't think that there's a way that you do yet. So I think a little bit more, I do think that a little bit more, if you want to follow what was the Avenue In process in some ways, it would take a little bit more refinement between the Board of Adjustment and the building inspector to figure out exactly what those variance issues are. So it's only one trip to the Board of Adjustment versus multiple trips.
Right. I think there's something else too, and we're focusing on very specific items with regard to the building code, but there's another part of our code, and that's called the Comprehensive Development Plan. That has the force and effect of law. And that really provides the glue for the community that where the building code deals with very explicit items, as you're pointing out. And in many cases, when you sit back as what you're trying, you look at the building code and you say, I don't think this makes any sense. It really would be better if it was this. Well, that's where the comprehensive development plan comes into play. And that's what we worry about. And all of the history that Mr. Papajohn has pointed out, I only have 40 years here. I don't go back as far as he does. But we have to worry about the next 40 years and the character and the nature of the entire community. And so that brings into some real challenges. As a business person, you have to deal with moral hazard. You have the right to spend all the money you want. You have the right to lose all the money you want, but you also have the right to make all the money you want within that context. And so that's what we're looking at. And the Avenue in that particular case, the proposals that we dealt with, they came in with a code-compliant design. But it really was lousy. And it could have been improved by making certain modifications that did require variances. And when we evaluated it and worked at it as a team, we were able then to essentially vote support for those change. And I think that basically went through without a hitch very easily and very quickly. Now this one is larger scale, has other issues, but I think you can probably do something very similar and say, well, look, this would be code compliant, but look what's wrong with this. And then start to build the items to get to it. And you may get agreement from us on several items, you may get disagreement. And that's the give and take that has to take place. But then you go in, and now you're in a situation of a surety. And hopefully, in doing that kind of evaluation, based on the facts and evidence, that as the applicants, they'll say, okay, it's not really what I wanted, but it's still financially viable, still makes sense for the long term, let's go with it. Because it is a case of give and take, but we have to represent the entire city of Rehoboth Beach, whether it's business people or residents, et cetera. So I agree with David completely. I think that would be the right path, the most effective path, and I think would actually get you to the finish line much faster.
Yes,
So
Mr.
Hal, before you speak, I should say one thing. Hal's my attorney, but I don't think I have a conflict because I don't listen to him anyway, so.
I know the feeling, Hal. I know the feeling.
Which puts him in the same position as
I
Glenn.
understand what you're saying, and our purpose here is not to challenge anything, but we're looking for your input. The big concern that I have, because this is what I've done for many years, is sometimes boards and commissions delay things for months and years, and if you'll give us a priority so you could address these issues, we'd welcome it. We're here for your suggestions. I mean, we spent a lot of money on this project already, and the goal here is to get this thing going before we run out of money. So, or before sea level rises, right, David?
Yeah.
But anyway, the truth of the matter is, our goal is to get this thing on. And I don't think that anything you said, or you said, Mike, that is anything different than what we're thinking. That's not the point. The point is, we're just trying to get this thing moving, and we're laying it out as best we can for you folks. I'm sure Dom's going to have his opinion. The concern we had was, though, in the course of events, Dom has said certain things that maybe we disagree when we read the code. And we didn't want that to just completely stop. And the thinking was that to keep this process going, we go to the Board of Adjustment and get the Board of Adjustment to say, yes, Dom's right, or yes, we're right. And then I guess we have to come back to you again. But, you're saying, well, if you think this is the overall beneficial plan for the community, and it would make sense, you would back us on that, and it would help us with the Board of Adjustment. So in that regard, that's great. Thank you.
I think we understand the timeline that you're on, and the responsibility that we have in responding to you. I'm just worried, and I don't want to restate it again, is that when you go to the Board of Adjustment and ask for a specific variance, they really don't necessarily and are not supposed to look at the broad aspects of the entire project.
That wasn't our intention. The intention
Yeah, I know, but and therefore they may not understand the impact of that particular variance, if you like, or deviation, if you like, on the entire project. And then we're faced with a problem when you come back to us, is that we then have to deal with a decision that's already been made. And we just don't think that's necessarily the right way to do it. There is a bit of a chicken and egg related to it. It would be wonderful if we could work in combination with them, but we can't. They're two separate boards with two separate purposes.
Okay, I think that we're all on the same page.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. And we haven't heard anything from the public, of course, and we also haven't heard anything from Don. Okay, so Susan, did you have anything in addition?
No, we all know what the issues are, I think, and I guess we hear what you're saying, and we thank you for that, and we'll go forward with this with you.
Okay. Mr. Molina, how about giving us
Yeah,
the
I
city
just want
side
to
of
say,
the view?
I just want to say that, the city of Rehoboth Building and Licensing, rather than Dom being the respondent, it's the
I'm
building and
sorry.
licensing that's
It's
responding.
the city.
I feel like everybody's picking on me today.
It's very personal.
But Building and License Office is open to meet and assist the applicant through this process. And one of the things that that hasn't come out of the discussion today, that it crosses other chapters of the code, specifically when we're talking about the rooftop amenities. If there's liquor going to be served there, that falls into Chapter 215 with the restaurants and serving of alcohol without any dining, that, variances will have to be pursued for that as well. So you might as go after all the variants at the same time.
Okay. And we know you have not, my understanding is although you furnished us a piece of paper which sort of summarizes plans A, B, and C numerically relative to FAR and square footage, but you have not made your own assessment yet, is that correct?
I have not crunched my own numbers.
Okay. And we know that there are potential challenges there of certain things being included or not included. For instance, in their presentation or presentation of areas, they did not include the parking garage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have indicated that perhaps that should be included.
Well, I indicated in my
determined?
report, I indicated in my report, the updated report, that would substantially increase the FAR as well.
So we need to get those numbers correct, where we both agree on numbers. The amount of square footage, the FAR, the open space, if you like, or what those issues are. We need to have a list of those, and we have to understand where there's potential for give and take.
Sure.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of how much time is involved in doing that, working with the applicant?
As soon as the applicant meet, we could begin a process to begin to analyze it and come up with those lists.
Okay.
And it could be, it could be straight with Susan, and I don't know if Peter has to travel some distance, but if it's not available, I could just meet with Susan.
I think that those numbers are readily available. It's just a matter of adding them up and putting them together.
There is one number I would like you to check. Okay, no, there's probably several. I sort of confirmed that is the area layout and that area number, although I have to tell you that the calls on the azimuth as shown on your drawings are not what is needed. They have to be changed in order to go into a program to calculate the area, because what's shown on the drawings won't close, okay? But that's a minor detail. But I believe it does close if you get the directions correct. But there is a breakdown on the 171 feet. I think it's the Wilmington Avenue, where there's 171 feet and then another 50 feet. And then there's a breakdown of the numbers inside, sort of. If you add them up, they don't add up to 171 feet. I'm going to assume for now that the 171 feet is probably correct. But like any drawing, if one number is wrong, then any number can be wrong. So somehow we need to check those. We've had problems with survey. I don't know if the drawings that you're presenting are in fact a survey drawing that's been prepared by a surveyor, a licensed surveyor, or whether there's a copy, if you like, of information onto your drawings. So whether something has been transcribed improperly. We have, unfortunately, a history over many years of surveys not being correct, okay? Sometimes they don't close, okay? Sometimes they're way off on square footage, or lines just aren't measured. So we would ask you sort of to recheck those.
I would just like to say you're not alone. Don't feel bad.
I do feel bad.
It's not the first jurisdiction that has had these kind of anomalies.
Yeah.
I think that, we'll go back and talk to the civil engineers and find out what the story is.
Yeah, our experience is sometimes,
Gotten to that phase, so it's sort of like, that's when we get ready to start really drawing this building, we will make sure this, the lot closes and our building.
yeah, well,
Typically in this phase, there's a little level of ambiguity there, and it's interesting that you say that, and I think that one of my guys actually told me.
yeah, well, actually, if you take the numbers that are on the drawing, that's what you get. Okay, so, and if you try to change them a little bit and get them to close, that's what you get. But I finally figured out that the numbers, I think, are essentially right. But we've just had some bad experiences. And sometimes we have found that surveyors don't go back and actually survey. They look at the previous deed and they copy what was on the previous deed. And in Delaware, Mr. Duke can probably help me out, or Glenn can, but title insurance doesn't guarantee meets and bounds in Delaware. It does in other states, but not in Delaware, okay? So that poses a few problems, okay? So we just ask you to check those so that when you start working with Dom on numbers, we can all agree that.
We have a real square footage to start off with, a real solid one that everybody can point
Well, I confirmed the one that you've got, so, yeah, so, but if one number is off, then,
Same one Dom has?
well, it's working from your drawings. So just ask you to check those, if you would. And I guess the other question that we asked, I think we asked Alex, or maybe you the last time, is whether you had done any corings. I mean, so much of this design depends upon the parking garage being where the parking garage is. And we are vitally interested as to where the water table is. I know Mr. Papajohn said that, they had dug down and never discovered water, but these are changing times. Yeah, no, I know you did. But things are changing, okay?
We get it. We're going to have a geotech report, no question about it.
Yeah.
This building, there will be a geotech.
Yeah, I mean, because so much is critical relative to the parking garage.
We did go in the basement. There is a basement in the existing building.
Yeah.
It does
Excuse
change
me,
the
can I
height.
have you stand up at the microphone?
Yeah,
We did, there is a basement in the building. It does have different head height. It's, one of those basements that goes up and down. But there is a dry basement there now on the building that's at the corner. So, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. Our garage will probably be a couple, maybe 2 or 3 feet deeper than that. And plus, there'll be a foundation system underneath of that. So, yeah,
Okay.
right. Geotech will tell us exactly where the water table is, or at least where it is in that particular spot.
Just as maybe feedback, let's hear from the public first, and then we'll give you some feedback.
I just wanted to comment,
Yes,
what I
yeah.
said last time was, in that basement, which has been there for many years, there are 2 sump pumps. I think I said this when I was here last. In the northwest corner where the surf shop is, Sierra Moon, and all the way down to the southeast corner underneath Grotto Pizza, almost within 50 feet of the boardwalk, approximately. And the water level is below the basement level, and it's about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and depending on how much of a storm we have, the level may rise in it 5 or 6 inches, 8 inches, comes up to within about 1 foot of the bottom of the basement in it. But the sump pump has never been activated. I think I mentioned last time. The only time it was flooded was when the storm drains on Rehoboth Avenue were clogged and it came in from the street.
Thank you. We, by the way, are going to, not as part of your project, but the Planning Commission, as part of the CDP, will be discussing sea level rise and the impact. So we are going to attempt to bring in, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but some experts to discuss with us the best thoughts on what is likely to happen over the next few years and going on. And as I indicated, I think before, there's been a lot of work on the West Coast related to this, and we need to know what's going to happen here, and especially close to the boardwalk and close to the beach. Can we open it up to the public? We have, I believe, a presentation or a discussion? Okay. You want to?
Is that good?
Good, that helps.
Again, my name's Tim Willard with Fuquay, Willard, Stevens, and Shaw. We have an office here in Rehoboth and one in Georgetown. I think I was here at your last sketch meeting as well. I represent Michael Treos. He's here with his son Christopher and wife Helen. And they, I don't know, you don't need to put the picture up, but they own the white blob that's at the corner. We'll call it the white blob. But actually, it's 7 through 15 a boardwalk, and it's 1 Wilmington Avenue, which is also known as Zoggs. I think the most efficient thing I can do, since you've been here for over 2 hours, is just read you my letter, which is only just a page, a little over a page. It's most efficient, if I may.
Yeah, and can you then give Ann a copy?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
My client just has 4 serious concerns with the development as currently proposed, and some of those have been mentioned, and as you already mentioned, that you take more of a global look of this project, and obviously, because of the proximity to what they're doing, these are serious concerns for them. Number 1, sufficient entry and exit points around the Belhaven Hotel complex must be provided. If there was a fire or EMS emergency in the central core of Belhaven, fire and EMS crews would be able to access the property. Climbing over the roofs of my client's properties for emergencies would jeopardize the safety of the Belhaven guests, as well as increase the risk of damage to their property. Of course, serious emergencies may require fire and EMS crews to intrude upon my client's properties, but the Belhaven design should not rely on my client's properties as primary means for accessing the central core of the Belhaven. It looks like since the last plan, they might have removed a staircase from the boardwalk, and I'm not sure why that is. I think the more exits you have, the better. My client actually has some expertise in this area. That's why that's probably one of the primary things he put in this, because he's a Fairfax land planner dealing with EMS. The second concern, my client may also want to improve and redevelop their boardwalk and Wilmington Avenue properties. In considering the Belhaven design plans, the Planning Commission should acknowledge this future development. And I think it was already mentioned by one commissioner, reference that, in particular, any such future development should not be challenged by the Papa John family, their developer, or the Planning Commission, because it would result in the obstruction of the Belhaven Ocean View rooms. My client would like some assurance from Planning Commission that their plans to redevelop vertically in the future will not be denied because Belhaven argues economic or aesthetic harm if and when the ocean views of their hotel rooms are obstructed. And I'm sure Mr. Mendelis could weigh in on that law. Number 3, the proposed underground parking garage must not affect the structural integrity of my client's property. This has just recently been addressed. Based on the current design of Belhaven underground parking garage and considering the FEMA flood zones, my client's property will be subjected to a greatly increased risk of subterranean hydrostatic pressure. This could not only result in an increased risk of severity of flooding, but could likely result in liquefaction of soils beneath my client's properties, which could pose a very serious risk to the structural integrity of these properties. If it does, the Papa John family and their developers should be fully required to bear the financial burden of rectifying any situation. Finally, you all are familiar with Zog's. It's the restaurant located at 1 Wilmington Avenue. Zog's Bar and Grill is an existing outdoor restaurant that serves liquor and offers live outdoor music and entertainment. The restaurant is open yearly until 1 a.m. daily. The restaurant has both indoor and outdoor seating. The Papa John family and/or their development partners should expect that there will continue to be food, odors, noise from patrons and staff, and live music, etc., which comes from such an establishment. My client does not want their tenant, which has operated successfully in that location for decades, to have the restaurant operations affected because of the complaints from Belhaven. The Belhaven design must anticipate that my client tenant will continue to operate their restaurant and bar as they traditionally have. As a result, the Papa John family and their development partner must design the Belhaven with some consideration of this in mind. That is the implication of noise abatement. I know you have laws dealing with that, which deal with more horizontal noise than vertical. So these are things that are probably preemptive, but Mr. Treos is going to add to this somewhat in his presentation to just put you all on notice, and I imagine you already maybe are, that these are serious concerns for them.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Mellon and Commissioners. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. First off,
Your name and address
I'm
again.
about to do that. My name is Dr. Michael Trejos. I am one of the co-owners of the properties located at 7 through 13 Surf Avenue, Boardwalk, South Boardwalk, and 1 Wilmington Avenue. A little bit of background, as I mentioned in the April meeting, I am a physician in practice in Alexandria for over 35 years. I am also a professor at 5 medical schools and most notably at Georgetown. Additionally to all my other expertise, this is the presentation. I have disclosures that I am required to make whenever I do anything in Fairfax. I am the at-large physician, representative member on the Fairfax County Healthcare Advisory Board. In Fairfax County, as you probably are aware, Fairfax County population-wise is larger than 8 other states of the United States, including the state of Delaware. As a result, the Board of Zoning Appeals, which would be your equivalent here, is inundated, absolutely inundated, as you can imagine, by applicants coming in for structural developments. As a result, in Fairfax County, these applications must first go through subboards, in this case, our board, when it comes to large structural entities that deal anything with healthcare or anything of that nature. So all those structures have to go. On a monthly basis, we go through applications. Just this past Monday, we just approved an application for a large structure for Sunrise Development Corporation. So we have a lot of expertise when it comes to this matter. Additionally, I'm the physician commissioner on the City of Alexandria Public Health Advisory Commission. And then lastly, I'm also a National Association of Radio Telecommunications and Engineer, NARTE certified first-class engineer. And I have FCC licensure that goes with that. So we have a lot of expertise in this matter. So first thing we're going to want to address is, again, the flood zone aspect of the FEMA. And here you'll see you have the National Flood Zone Hazard Layer, as we now see it here. You see in the green where it talks about the Zone AE. However, it's somewhat difficult to see. It's colored in blue, obviously, to indicate water. If we now go to the actual FEMA maps, and we look at the map that goes from basically Olive Avenue all the way down to Bethany Beach, the affected areas in the north portion of this picture. However, to better understand that, we need to first now go to the applicant's plot and placement that they have and their boundary survey. What I found of interest is that most plot and placement surveys are performed in a south to north direction. This has been performed in a north to south direction. So what needs to be done is you literally need to flip it upside down to get a better understanding of where you're dealing with the flood zones. As you can see here, the applicant has correctly noted the first area of the flood zone here. And now to answer my cousin John's statement that he just made, we're in the southeast corner where the sump pumps were not working. That is correct because there is no flood zone into that southeast corner. However, if you look now further down where you look at the Lot 1 and Lot 15, 16 Surf Avenue, and you see the line that goes across there, you begin to realize that this is now in the flood zone. To get a better appreciation, let's now blow up the original FEMA map, and now you can see exactly what we're talking about here. You have to remember the properties divide here. John, where you were talking about your sump pump would be located here. However, in this area here, we've had a significant flooding in our basement area, okay? So we need to recognize that this is the area, and it extends all the way past what the applicant has put in. This is, as we all know, one of the largest areas of flooding that occurs in Rehoboth Beach, exemplified by Hurricane Michael, where Rehoboth Avenue basically became a river at that time. So continuing on, this is now the proposed plan with regard to how this structure would work. You're looking at our structure here. This area in between here, which was exemplified in the video that was just saying as a walking area, is not. This is our area to where we get into our property. So this area here actually belongs to us. This is the retaining wall that they would use to have the egress and exit into the central core. Now, going further, if we now take the exact area here, this is our property here, as you can see, correctly depicted. Now, what you're looking at is, let's look at the parking garage. This is the original setup, but the parking garage is going to have to be built, it's going to be built 10 feet down. As was noted a moment ago, it's going to be at least 10 feet down with an additional 2 to 3 feet of concrete subflooring. And as you may have, let me just quickly go back a second, you can see here, we're already at the elevation of 12 feet. If we go to here, you can then see, again, the 12 feet mark here, sorry. If you go to the 12-foot mark, we're already at that point. So our concern that we have is that any sort of subterranean parking garage like that is going to significantly increase the hydrostatic pressure as any pressure coming from east to west approaches and hits that wall. It's going to create tremendous pressure here, and the concern would be, depending upon that pressure, any potential liquefaction of the earth soils beneath our property, and not only our property, but also Wilmington Avenue. You have to remember, because any water that's going to hit it is going to have no way going north, no way going west, no way going west at this point, and it's all going to have to come pouring out this way to get out. So we have to just keep that in perspective when this is done, and therefore we address this issue with regard to any issues that may occur. The developer would have to take responsibility for that. Now, the next thing I want to just quickly discuss is the EMS access to the central core. As we do in Fairfax County, we have to always deal with the concern for the public and EMS access. Here is the original proposal that the applicant submitted back in April, where you see that the original was supposed to have a 11-foot, 9-inch opening to go into, quote, open space, as Commissioner Mellon, you had noted, was to go into open space. That was the original one, 11 foot 9 inches, that was supposed to go into the central core. Here was the original example of what we were talking about. Now the applicant has cut it off. It's all been closed. There is no open space, as you were alluding to earlier in your discussions. Now, that being said, here is what is now been counter-proposed, which is a 5-foot opening here on the south side. Here's the dimensions, 5 feet, and again, our property line begins there. Now, to give some understanding of what 5 feet means, let's take a look at what an EMS gurney looks like. This is an EMS gurney. This is how the hospitals use it. This is 5 feet. This is now where you would have, keeping in perspective, any stairwell will have to have handrails. So I'm assuming the handrails would be maybe 3 inches, 4 inches. So you've now cut that narrow down. And try and imagine trying to get an EMS transport up and down, a cardiac patient, something like that, with a person at the top and the bottom and the EMS people working on the patient at the same time, coming down that 5-foot opening. This is what you just need to consider when you're looking at EMS access. Now I want to talk about, just closing now, the NFPA fire access to the central core of structures. Here again was the original proposal in April where they talked about a significant opening. This opening here would provide for a substantial and appropriate, and again, the original drawings, an appropriate access for EMS fire heavy equipment to be able to get into that central core in this area here. That was most appropriate. Now the applicant, again, is proposing a total cutoff of that central core access. There is none. I'm sorry, there is none at this point. So therefore, you now have to deal dependent totally on this 5-foot entrance egress to get to the central core. Again, that raises a concern for fire and EMS. If there was to be an incident, a fire incident in this northwest corner in here, there is absolutely no way heavy equipment or any fire apparatus is going to get into that central core. It's not going to happen. And as a result, what is the point of most access for putting up water cannons? They would have to jump onto our flat roof, come up, establish the water cannons, and push the water in. Our property should not be considered the primary means of addressing fire aspects to the structure when such an event should occur. The Planning Commission should take into consideration that this is not the primary way, and though we don't necessarily object to it being obviously in a secondary, but not the primary way of dealing with the issue of the appropriate access to that central core. And that's it, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Does Ann have those slides?
Oh, yeah, well, we'll give it to her, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Any questions from,
There's more from the audience.
hang on for a moment, Gary. Any questions? Gary?
Gary Glass, 105 Country Club Drive. When you talk about going to the Board of Adjustments, that concerns me as a resident here. The Board of Adjustments has become a way of circumventing the code. The Planning Commission has before worked in its review process and gone to the Board of Commissioners and changed the code, changed the law for everybody. So we're all playing by the same rules, and it's allowed the applicant's projects to go forward. One that I remember is Oak Grove. That process could also happen here, that if the Planning Commission decides that the code is out of date and that the standards do override and that the code should be brought up to date, the more appropriate process, I think, to follow would be to take it to the Board of Commissioners and have them change the code for everybody, not to the Board of Adjustments and give certain people special privileges and not others. I've heard a lot of talk in town about why can some people do some things and other people are not allowed to do the same thing. So this would make it a level playing field for everybody, and it would bring our code up to date.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Zellers, and I live at 308 Stokely Street in Rehoboth Beach. One of the things that I can't understand, here you are, you're going to be knocking down almost a block and a half, and they can't build within the code? Why is it all these variances? Something tells me that the engineering firm that did this did not really read the code, or they wouldn't have come up with all these different variations. I tell you, I think you're wasting your money with them. Go with a different firm.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else from the public? Going once, going twice? We'll close the public comment then. Discussion amongst the Planning Commission. on going forward.
I think the recommendation that we've made, actually that you made, David, I think is the appropriate one to address the issues. And from the standpoint of industry standards or standards in general, I mean, we look at it from planning standards, the larger perspective for the entire public. I think that's the appropriate course of action that I think we should recommend as a board, and I would recommend personally as a planner to go forward.
I think from an overall standpoint, maybe I totally agree with both of you, but maybe we need to rethink the regulation that everything we can't look at something until it's code compliant.
I'm not sure that is that, Glenn, help me, but I'm not sure that actually is written into the code. That's more, has been a historical practice. And it has its purpose only in not wasting the time of the Planning Commission in discussing something. I don't.
I can review the code, but my understanding is that for a sketch review, it is not a requirement.
Well, for sketch review, it doesn't
But I
matter.
think for an actual site plan review, I think Dom Building and Licensing Department needs to make a determination based upon what they have before them that it is code compliant before it gets presented to you. I'll check, but that's my
Please
recollection.
check the code. I'm not convinced that the code actually says that. I think historically we've done that as a practice because we don't want to waste time.
Let me look while you're.
I think the language until I'm satisfied that it's ready to come before
Yeah.
you.
But I, for instance, there are, in the code, it is written that the chief building inspector can bring before the planning commission any projects that he feels require the discussion by the planning commission. So again, let's check the code specifically on that. We will. Yeah, Rick?
Thank you. So I think we're substantially further along than we were in April. I mean, we asked for clarity about the wish list, about how the hotel would operate, what the market niche was, so that we could understand how everything works together with the community, the additional parking, the retail. What we got this time is still a sketch and still a concept, but much more developed. I have a better idea now of what the public space is, what the open space is, what the function is. Of course, we're all familiar with the changing marketplace, understanding that a year-round hotel needs to have an affiliation for the customer network, how a ballroom might function and why that's important, and the rooftop deck. So I feel like the funnel is working. I think it's much more focused. What I don't have any idea of is all the variabilities with the FAR and the scale and where the conflicts are or may be and what the various iterations are. So I think we need to go through the funnel one more time. I would repeat what everybody said about not going to the Board of Variances. I mean, go for a variance at this point, because I think in one more round, we can get to substantial facts that we could discuss what our recommendations might be. Right now, it's just a little bit too squishy, but nothing that's been proposed seems outrageous if we had all the numbers and if we understood how it all worked together with more detail.
I would echo what Jeff just said, and I think he's correct in his assessment of where we are now and where we were in April. One thing that is clear, and it's unfortunate in a lot of respects, but in even my short tenure here on the Planning Commission of, I guess, a year and a half at this point or something like that, we've had numerous cases come before us, numerous applicants bringing proposals before us, and almost invariably in each case, we realize that there are provisions in our code that simply don't make a lot of sense. And I think we're all pretty united in that view. Obviously, I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but and that's part of the CDP process as well. And we recognize that there are probably things that need to be changed, things that don't make a lot of sense, and code provisions that don't meet today's standards and industries and changing times. And Rehoboth isn't alone in having to look at those types of things and address them as quickly as possible. I just want to be sure that the process that's undertaken here moves along smoothly, and that it doesn't get bogged down unnecessarily, and that whether it's the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, or the Board of Commissioners, if something needs to go to them, that delays won't be an impediment to your ability to move forward with a project. I too don't like to see a lot of variances because I don't believe that it's the proper way to have our city develop, and that everyone ought to be entitled to the same benefits of our code as any other party. Unfortunately, we have to accept the reality of the fact that while we may all decide that there are provisions of the code that should be changed that would allow you to move forward in a compliant manner without variances, time doesn't stand still. And so it may be that at the end of the day, seeking a variance from the Board of Adjustment in a number of cases may be necessary before we can complete our full review and analysis as part of the CDP and make our recommendations to the Board of Commissioners for any code changes that might be appropriate. Bottom line is, I think Jeff is correct. We need one more time at the funnel here. I think that would be useful to you and to us, and that we can then move forward, hopefully, in a reasonable and appropriate way.
I had a few things.
Please.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I am very interested in what these industry standards are, so I would like to learn more about that. I was thinking of what you said earlier about how our FAR calculations with regard to the covered porches and the decks and the pool are not in line with other communities. And I would say that I have to think the reason for that is simply scale. That being only 1 square mile and having everything residential and commercial all together in the 1 square mile dictated when the code was written that these elements be taken into account, because otherwise the bulk would be even greater. And, rightly or wrongly, or whether that changes in the future or whether there's a variance on it for one project or another, it is the standard against which all other projects have been compared, been assessed. So in that sense, we need to look at it with those numbers as well as your numbers, your desired numbers, because it makes for an apples-to-apples comparison of bulk with other, projects nearby. Also, in regard to what Mike said about the comprehensive development plan, and yes, we are in the throes now of redoing it. And what you may not know is that there is a lot of interest in having a new mixed-use zone in the commercial districts, and in fact, Wilmington is one of the streets that has been talked about for that zone, which would involve apartment living over, commercial, over retail on the bottom floor. And, while I understand that these rooftop is a trend with hotels, I'm also seeing, yes, Rehoboth Beach is a resort, but it's not a resort the way, maybe the resort area of Cayman is, because it's a residential resort. And it's all in 1 square mile. All the residences, all the commercial, we're all in it together kind of thing. So if we go with an urban development trend of mixed use and we have more people living downtown, then that roof deck adversely impacts more people. And that's a going forward, that's what we're gonna do going forward, but we do have to look at the impact on, the changes we would make going forward. And I guess, and the other part of that too is just how sound carries. I mean, I don't know, it's something we would have to assess, but I don't know, for instance, if the sound from that rooftop would travel even into our residential areas the way the bandstand does now, for instance. So it's just a function of the challenge of being such a tiny community, I think, is really where those things come from. And my last point is actually something that struck me when Mr. Seidel was talking, completely unrelated to the physical structure, completely unrelated at all. But when he was talking about the affiliation of the hotel chains, and he talked about points, and how, in his community in Ocean City, people use their points to come, and he thinks that's really neat because they've selected it to, to use their points. What happens to the revenue and the hotel tax when he gave some high percentage, like 50% of people there are using their points. In that case, does the city lose out on the hotel, on revenue from that? I don't know. Yeah, or does the chain make up for that in dollars, even though they're giving the customer points? It's just a question at some point we should answer.
Income tax, you rent a room, no matter who pays for it, it's income, you as an owner pay a tax.
Okay.
And that's all. I mean, it's the same thing as if they came in and gave you.
Okay, so the chain.
gets added on.
It does get added up. Okay, great. That's comforting.
Otherwise, it'd be great, you wouldn't have to put much to IRS.
Right. I know, right.
Like the president.
Yeah. That's all.
Anything else?
No, I thought.
Let me sort of summarize where I think we are, maybe, and other people can chime in. Seems like we have some homework to do between the design team and working with building and licensing to at least develop the numbers, or at least two sets of numbers, and how they represent or are interpreted relative to code and relative to your desire. You potentially, I think, have heard some, I think a couple other things that I heard that I really think you have to pay some attention to. I think the safety issues, of course, I had mentioned the floodplain. I really think that we need, early in the game, a better understanding of what the potential problems are there. So however that is done, I don't think that plus the safety issues is something that you can put off until later, especially if ingress and egress are an innate part of, let's say, the safety. So whether you're working with our fire chief or whether you're working with the state fire chief, it seems to me that you need more than just the tacit approval or non-approval. You really have to open up and say, is this a problem? And let's get it right the first time, because you're in it for the long haul in something like this. And the last thing that we need in this city is an accident where we have not handled it and where we could have handled it by design. Okay, so I think you need some homework there. Working, I'm not sure who you work with, but I'm sure you can work it out with building and licensing or your own resources, or Susan, and perhaps you'll even talk with your cousins and neighbors. Okay, so it seems like that kind of homework. Potentially, we've talked about maybe some design changes that would improve the streetscape, and perhaps those are more aesthetic in nature, but you might be thinking about those and how they impact the design, so that when we come together the next time, we have answers to the numbers questions, hopefully some of the safety and the floodplain questions, and the design is perhaps a lot firmer. So I tend to think, for instance, C design, and I have to look at these really, but to me, the C design, moving things back away from the vertical directly over the boardwalk just diminishes the scale, keeping the scale down. And this addresses some of the things that Susan was talking about, is that scale in this city has been important. And it also perhaps, you might be able to figure out a way to cut the shadow even further, by moving the cupola back something like that. But it seems to me you have architecturally, aesthetically, some design issues, and then there's some real design issues you got to work on. Okay?
Yeah, we had a pre-meeting with Dom, and we developed a set of drawings that showed incrementally each of the wish list items.
Yep.
And he recommended that we not walk you through that like that because it's a lot of information. You know, it's
You're talking about the numbers.
the numbers
We have copies of that.
of the 5 options, the 5 steps. Did he
I
give
think
them-
we do.
Did he give them to you?
Well, there are 3, I think.
There's three. There's
No,
three.
but that's just addressing the rooftop, right? The 3 options are everything. So the wish list is, the rooftop is just one item of the rooftop. And so Don, what I'm talking about is, remember when we met with you and I walked you through, you know, if we added the ballroom, it added this much FAR. If we added the balconies, it added this much FAR. You know, we incrementally, because that's sort of what you asked me to do, and I did that. And Dom felt like that would maybe be too much information to go through here and now. And so we have that information currently, and we can, so maybe there's a way for us to give that information to you.
I think we do. I think we have it. Don't we, Nom?
I don't think we do.
Well,
We don't have it summarized like that, like
No.
those
Well,
5
what
things.
we
So you don't
have
have it
is-
like that?
we
That's
have
not
thi-
it.
But that doesn't include the ballroom and the...
You have like a summary of the 3 options, probably?
Yeah.
So what I would say is that we
figure out a way to show them.
we send that information in.
Well, let me tell you what, and I'm not trying to tell Dom how to run his business, but right now we have your numbers. What we don't have is the city's numbers, how they interpret the same design. And we know there's differences. We need that. The Planning Commission needs that kind of information. We need to know if the FAR is which can go up to 2, is 2.49 or 3.49.
No, definitely. If you include the basement in the FAR, you add a point. It's
Yeah,
just straight
well,
up.
we need to, we need to know what those numbers are, and
To me, we can go over.
Yeah, we'll work with Dom to give you those numbers.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I suspect that, and he can answer, you know, I suspect that there's at some point, there's a decision on the part of building and licenses, how far they go to do an analysis during a sketch review. But we're sort of getting a little bit beyond the sketch review right now.
But are we coming back as another sketch review, or are we going into plan review?
No, I think you're going to come back as a sketch. Well, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what the numbers are yet. You know, I don't know what the
But I thought you said
deviations are.
Whatever they were, they should come to preliminary plan review.
Well,
Then again, because I was listening, and you're still determining whether you can look at something that's non-compliant. So we need to know where we are with this, to be able to come back to you with all this information.
So to be clear, on a sketch review, Dom does not have the documents that he needs to determine FAR, gross floor area. They just don't, at a sketch review stage, they're not required to present those sorts of documents. So
Okay.
there's no way you're going to have detailed concrete numbers as to what their floor area ratio
Okay,
calculation
that's
is
fair,
versus
that's fair.
his. So that does happen at actual site plan review. On the question of whether they can come before you with whether the plan must be code compliant or not, 236-32 says, site plans shall be submitted to the Building and Licensing Department. The department shall review the site plan for compliance with zoning requirements and then initiate review of the site plan by all affected city departments and agencies. The department shall complete its review within 30 days of submission, but may take additional time for good cause. If all departments and agencies determine that the site plan complies with their respective regulations and requirements, the site plan shall be forwarded from the building inspector to the Planning Commission with a report indicating the department's preliminary approval of the site plan. So I think that the departments all have to say, based upon the plans that we have before us, it complies with their regulations. And because building and licensing is specifically charged with reviewing plans for zoning compliance, I do think that building and licensing has to make a determination that it's zoning compliant before it comes before you. And I think that's part of the reason that Avenue Inn, if you remember, Avenue Inn presented a code compliant plan because that's how they could get before you. Then they presented a what we'd really like to do plan.
Okay, how do we get to where we want to go? Because technically, building and licensing will say, I haven't seen sufficient plans yet to even do those calculations.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me as though, we're chasing our tail on this, and that's not fair to us, and it's not fair to applicants.
It's not fair to the applicant.
To the applicants either, and it seems to me that there are, obviously, you're our city solicitor and you advise us, and I'm just not sure. I thought that there was some leeway on the part of the building inspector to refer matters here that didn't necessarily meet those requirements. But if you're telling us that in a sketch plan review, the information that would be provided to the building inspector would not allow him to do the necessary calculations to tell us how far out of the FAR compliance any particular plan is and all. I mean, we don't have the square footage for the balconies and all those things that may or may not be required to be included in FAR. If they're going to submit a site plan, we already know it's going to be non-compliant. So how do they ever get here? I mean, this makes no sense.
Right, so you're not going to want to hear it, but one way they get before you is they go to the Board of Adjustment for those areas that are clearly non-compliant and determine whether the Board of Adjustment will grant variances or not. If the variances is granted, then it comes to you as a code compliant project because they have established that their law for their project has been varied. I understand that this planning commission does not like that process, and I understand that the reasons why, but to suggest that, to me, it's not so offensive to me. If a Board of Adjustment is doing its job and applying the legal standard that it's supposed to apply, then there is a level playing field. Everybody gets the same standard applied to them. If they meet the legal standard that says, yes, you have an exceptional practical difficulty, then a variance is granted. If you just want to do something because you want to do something and you can't meet that legal standard of exceptional practical difficulty, the Board of Adjustment should never grant that variance. So I think there is a level playing field. I agree with you that it sometimes seems backwards that somebody would go to the Board of Adjustment and then come to the Planning Commission. The only way you all can give feedback, I think, to a development application such as this one before they go to the Board of Adjustment is more so at the sketch plan review stage, but that would require the applicant to further develop plans so that they can work numbers out and see where they are. Because I think I'm hearing from you all that unless you have better numbers, you can't suggest that this would be an appropriate variance or that would be an appropriate variance. So it is.
It's a chicken and
between
egg.
Well, yes,
It is.
doesn't that place the applicant in the position of developing a site plan and calling it a sketch plan? I mean, just so that they can get it before us?
It does. I mean, the other option, of course, is design a code compliant plan that may just be a box and then they're before you at an actual site plan review where they can say, here's our code compliant plans. Remember, I thought it was a little bit compelling when Avenue Inn said, here's our code compliant plan, and it was not attractive. And they said, and here's what we'd like to do. And you all said, oh, let's talk about that one. So
So it seems artificial to need the one to do the other.
it does. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, they might just as well give us a napkin with
Right,
an
yeah,
outline of what is compliant, and then give us what you want.
What I thought when we were discussing going to the Board of Adjustment was that they have the capability to say this could happen, but you have the capability to say whether it should happen. So that it's not really, I didn't think it was before, because I believed you have the comprehensive plan, you have other things to consider. So so we can go and clear up these things and bring you something that is compliant, and then you can look at it and tell us,
I have-
Yeah, I don't think.
what the other things are about.
In the recent past, we have examples where issues don't go that way and have created long-term difficulties. I think the practical matter is that you have a conceptual drawing, which is what we all do when we start designs. We do a concept and say, this is what we really like to do, I think. Forget all the rules and regulations. It's what you'd like to do. And then you start to look at it and you find out, well, geez, we really can't do all that. And we need some code changes. We need some changes that somehow would allow us to do it. But in doing that, you may run into public opposition or, in fact, a Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board that says, great, you may want to do that, but you're really not, you're doing that from a personal standpoint, but it really doesn't take into account the public and the community at large, which is what the CDP process, for example, does. It provides, as I was saying earlier, sort of the glue, where the building code is just a very explicit thing, and sometimes they don't make sense. But I think the process that can get us there is, even at this stage, you have a very nebulous design that lacks all sorts of details. And without knowing that specificity, you were willing to go forward to the Board of Adjustment and say, well, I want to make all these changes, when you still really don't know what you're really looking for, because none of that detail has been worked out. That requires money, and I understand that, and you have to expend money. That's a process. When you want to make money, you have to spend it, and there is moral hazard, there is risk associated with it. I fully appreciate that. I think the best thing, Glenn, would be to take an approach from a more specific sketch plan review, where you do get into some of the details, where the engineering numbers are correct, and you have something tangible that you can work with. The building and licensing may still review that and say, we don't think it's code compliant. And he may identify those things he doesn't think is code compliant. And all of that can be brought to us. And we can look at that and review. And I think it does mimic very much so what the Avenue Inn did. They basically spent money and designed something they really didn't want, but it was code compliant. And then they were able to demonstrate very easily where things should be changed. And, which, by the way, we didn't agree with everything they wanted. But there were several things that made a lot of sense for the community at large, which is what our charge is. I think the same thing really is true here. The only difference is this is a much larger scale project.
So in that sense, it becomes an education for us.
It really is. It's for everybody. And it helps the public as well. Because right now, it's fuzzy right now. You have sort of a grand plan, but it's so fuzzy, as some of the public has already expressed, there are concerns. And as the planning board, we have concerns. Now, it may turn out many of those are alleviated, or a couple of them may bubble to the surface and say, boy, this is a real gotcha. This one just isn't going to fly. So I think it can evolve faster with, I'll say, phase 2 of a sketch review, which allows us to move this forward quickly, and so that the applicants can move forward as well to get better clarification. That would be my recommendation. I guess I should ask the rest of the board members if they agree with me, or.
Mike, are you saying that you think they should bring us something, as it worked with the Avenue Inn, they should bring us something that is code compliant? And then,
So they can show the variation of what they want to do.
Right.
At some point, we need
But-
to get a little bit of basic.
could I just keep going for a
sorry.
second? I think they tried to do that in the last meeting. They thought that what they brought was code compliant. And then they discovered that the parking garage had to be considered in FAR. Am I wrong? Is that the way this
No,
worked?
we assumed, the garage as part of the FAR makes this a non-starter project in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really in a nutshell.
And we
Yeah.
tried to
And in most jurisdictions, underground garages and underground structures are not included in FAR. Okay, it's sort of, that would be, maybe if the AI had their act together, they could say that, right? ULI their Urban Land Institute, you will probably find that in one of their guidebooks, that typically underground parking is not included in the FAR. If the underground parking is included in the FAR, then we can go home, you know? Or we can keep what's there, which is a one-level retail building. So, yeah, so that was kind of the big issue. The second issue was, we talked about, there was a little ambiguity as to whether the meeting space was included in FAR or was not. So there was that, so because the way it's written in your code, there's,
It's actually included in the section on FAR for some reason, but it goes back to saying that it, in no case shall FAR be over 2. But it was a little confusing at the time. So that was one thing. The parking, of course, we tried to clarify that. Because not only is it underground, but because of the flood zone it's in, and we're going well below that flood zone, that it should not be included in the FAR. And then, you know, minor other issues of whether the pool is included or is considered a structure, the balconies. These are all things that they're not variances. They're more clarifications or of the code for us to go forward. Because if we don't get some of this, it's like you said, it's not going to work.
But if the garage issue is resolved in your favor, you could then bring in something that's code compliant. May not be what you want to do.
that's
but
sort
you
of
could
what
do it.
we felt we did last time. We
Yeah.
felt we did bring you a code compliant option, and it was, we brought you two, one with 125 rooms and one with 100
Right.
rooms, if you remember those two diagrams.
Well, then
And-
we could go the Avenue in route if we can resolve the parking garage issue.
Well, I think, I think we could, although quite frankly, at that last meeting, the detail of what was perceived as code compliant was insufficient detail with which to make decision-making on, though. So it's sort of, it was, I'll call it, it was still preliminary in the sense that there was a lack of underlying detail when we get into the guts of it.
Yeah.
So that's what was missing. So if you readdress that, if you will, so that the guts are there that we need to know, so that we, from looking at the detail, we can then expand it to what you really would like to do. Then I think we can have a real dialogue, and that would allow you to move forward and not, I don't want to say waste time, because you have to get the engineering details in place before you go forward. And with that, it then can build with where you want to go to. And I think we as a board, we can accommodate that. And that gives the advantage of not, as Hal pointed out, not slowing things down. Try to do it as expeditiously as possible.
Unfortunately, in our working meeting, we had that code compliant building in our hands. And we walked through each item that would add our wish list, one item at a time. Okay,
So you're, in that case, if that exists, then you're a month away from another meeting.
Exactly. So we have it.
It
So
can
in other words, what
accelerate
I'm saying
fairly
is,
quickly.
we have that information, and we're happy to bring it back here. And
That's
maybe
what-
Dom and I can work through it so that we can present it to you, that he felt it was too complex to walk you guys, to be honest with you. He's like, you show this to them, they're gonna get lost. And well, he didn't say get lost. He said, it might, anyway, he used better language than that. But nicer language than that, more thoughtful language than that. So, so let us work with him to be able to come back to you in a month and actually show you that. We didn't do a 3D model of each option as we went through it. We didn't do, maybe that's when we should do. We should do a 3D model showing you a totally code compliant building. But one thing that I would like to get some clarity on, right? And that is the concept of the embellishment, the architectural embellishment. Like, how much of it is allowed to be? How tall can it be? What is the nature of an architectural embellishment? Because the total ambiguity of your code exists there, and our building and figurative architecture is about architectural embellishment. You know, so if you write a code that says you can have this much architectural embellishment, you really don't have architectural embellishment. You have a nod towards it. So there's that. So what I've given you is what you asked me, Peter, Mr. Papa John. What is your wish list? You've got the wish list. This is what we want to do, right? So the question is, what's a code compliant with architectural embellishment look like, right?
Let me pose a question, not so much to you, but to Glenn and to Don.
Sure.
Again, it's a chicken and egg problem. Let's assume that you want to go to the Board of Adjustment. I don't know exactly what you're asking for, but you're probably going to ask for something related to height and something related to FAR, and there may be a few other things. The Board of Adjustment is going to turn to the city, to Dom, and say, what is your position on this? Okay, they're not going to do it without the city responding. They're not going to let you come before them without the city responding. So whether he has enough information or not, he's going to have to respond one way or another. He's going to have to say what the city's position is, which means he's going to have a comparable set of numbers that says this is where it deviates from current code.
Fair enough.
Okay? So we can sit here all we want and say, well, it isn't the appropriate time to go through and generate those numbers, but it's
We're
got to
here
be
to work
done.
with you any way you want to work with us, believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be done.
We got
Even if
the
you go-
expert here driving the boat,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, that's the first thing the Board of Adjustment is going to ask is, okay, city, what do you think about this? What's your position?
Yeah, I see your point on some things on it, but my biggest concerns were the areas that, like the parking, where we want to make sure, and I'm, on those things, you know, if they're not included in the FAR, we had a compliant one, and we tried to make sure that it didn't have to be. So if we come to you with our numbers and show you that these are things that we don't, and I can show you the code sections that I rely on, and I can show you the ones Don relies on, and I see where he gets his impression, but I think that I always rely more on definitions. But if I show those, I mean, is that the way we can show compliance by showing you where some of the differences are, or is that something I have to?
No, I think that's part of it. I think, you know, he raised another question. There was a situation, and it really related to agave, okay? And it didn't come to us, but it came to the commissioners. And the commissioners got sort of caught up in having approved a license to operate a restaurant without ever approving the design of the building. And they got themselves into a real bind, quite honestly, because they got the horse or the cart before the horse, I guess. And all I'm trying to make sure is that when you sit down, whoever it is with us or with the Board of Adjustment, that we know that to the best of our ability, that there aren't any hidden gotchas. Okay? Okay? And what's the magnitude of the, you know, of the variation? I think we probably, if you took a poll, you'd probably find that as a poll, we agree with you on parking. And parking is one of those ludicrous things that the more parking you have, the more cars you need. Okay? I mean, that's the way the code goes. If you, huh?
Not for hotels.
Yeah. So that probably is a logical one. The rest of it relates to bulk. Some of the architectural details, you know, maybe adding bulk or subtracting from bulk, those are probably negotiable, okay? Safety, as the issues that hate to say it, but the safety issues really are very critical. So you need to take a hard look at your design and say, does this meet? Can we argue that we can easily meet the safety issues?
They go to the state fire marshal for review, and he
Yeah,
goes through
but
site
not,
plan.
Does it go through the plus review? Does it go through?
It doesn't go through plus, it goes to the state fire marshal.
Okay.
So he does a site plan review, and he reviews how.
when? Before you get a
before
building,
we go there, and we have to correct it.
but not necessarily before you go before the Board of Adjustment.
Oh, no, it's not, we look at the IBC, the International Building Code, and that will tell you for the size of building, what your exits should be, how wide they have to be, and how many you have to have, and how far from a room one exit can be, and all those things. And those will all be incorporated. Peter's group will do that. They've done lots of hotels. They'll have that in the design. and it'll meet the IBC. We also will meet whatever the state fire marshal's regulations are for the perimeter of the building, for access for the perimeter, and for where fire lanes may have to be. So that's all incorporated into the whole design of the building.
But if there's some reassurance that you'd like us to have where we could meet with the fire marshal ahead of time so that people understand.
Well,
that-
I mean, we heard some, counter discussion today that challenged perhaps part of the design.
Perhaps, but.
Perhaps, okay.
But what normally happens is that you do meet with the fire marshal in the planning process, and the fire marshal may require a road around the building or a lane around the building. And typically in urban conditions, the fire marshal understands where he's allowed to be with his truck. You know, it's a good question. Can the fire be fought from the boardwalk? Can the boardwalk support a fire truck? I don't know.
Now.
So someone does know that answer to that question. So, and then there's a requirement, I'm sure, as to how many sides the building it has to be accessible
Right.
by. And clearly, the building wouldn't be designed that you could only access it over the roof of another adjacent property owner's building. However, if we can have that conversation and confirm that the fire marshal is satisfied with being able to fight a fire in the building in an appropriate manner. The other thing is those requirements have to do with the construction type of the building, and so there's an understanding there that's at another level. So, but we are happy to have a meeting with him before we come back to see you, so we can have that conversation in the past. But it's not a problem.
It's the most expedient thing we can do for everybody. I don't want to see it get bogged down.
I don't want, yeah, let's find a way to move this forward.
Right, yeah. I mean,
My inclination says to proceed with having more in-depth discussions with building and licensing and some of these adjacent departments, if you like, safety, whatever, to answer some of those critical questions, and then being able to come back for us, let's call it a final sketch review, with basically a chart that says, this is what the code currently would call for, and this is where we are exceeding it in A, B, C, D, and E, and it's sort of I don't want to say it's a Chinese menu, but it gives us the option of then saying, we can support this kind of recommendation. That would be my inclination.
You have real tangible things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. Yeah, we can do that.
I just think we're not, I just think we're not close
there yet.
enough.
Yeah, I think to your point, David, what we look at is the manifest intent of code and the comprehensive development plan. And it goes beyond the explicit details. Those are an essential part of it. But what's the manifest intent of what we're trying to do for the benefit of the applicants, for the benefit of all the city, and try to make that call. And I take it as a very somber challenge and an obligation to do that in representing all the people. And right now, it's far too fuzzy. And I think you're very close to getting it to the next step so we really can have a much more tangible discussion. And even, I'll call it a sketch review on steroids, and yes, give me all the detail you want, I can handle it, I'm an engineer. So we'll go at it.
So that he, you guys can talk to us about it. We'll work together.
Okay, I think
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I think it would be helpful at that point also that to the extent that there is any disagreement in interpretation or which code provision one should really look at versus another, that you and Dom haven't agreed upon, it'd be helpful, I think, if you could give all of us specific citations to what you're relying on and why you're interpreting something one way and what Dom is saying, is what the city's relying on. So,
I have to say, I was an engineer for 60 years, okay? And probably did not see many designs fail because of bad engineering. What I saw was problems that occurred because we didn't ask the what-if question, okay? And if I learned one thing over that period of time, It's asking the what-if questions early in the game saves you a lot down the line. And so to the degree that we can answer many of those kinds of things, the better off we'll all be.
So we have consensus?
Yeah, do we have a consensus? Yes? Do you think it will be next month, or?
When,
Well, I don't know, what's your schedule like?
We could work out a schedule just for either the end of this month or
Well, you meet monthly, right?
Yeah, the 12th, I think, is the next.
12, the second Friday.
When would we have to submit information by?
For August. You might not be able to make it until August, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
How long have they have to submit information?
Ann, how long does information have to be submitted?
They're already in the process, so I'd say 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
But it gives us 2 weeks.
It gives you 2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks to get everything.
Yeah.
or the 28th.
What's your schedule like between now and the next 2 weeks, Tom?
Sure. Sure.
You're here?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we'll be able, as long as we have access to Tom, he's not going on vacation.
We can nail them down. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Papa John family.
Thank you for your comments.
Susan?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hal, thank you.
Enjoyed it. It does.
Volunteering. I know, from the Boy Scouts on up. Thank you.
Should we just move on into the rest
Yes.
of it without taking a break?
You bet.
Phew.
What prevents them from having?
Now we got 3 hours on the CDP and we'll be done.
let us proceed. I think we can do this relatively quickly.
I'm relieved to hear that. Ann's going to throw us out at 5 anyways, right?
Yeah, that's right. I hope so. And Bunky's the one that has the key to the building. He's not here, so we have to be done.
All right, we're CDPing, and let me just give you an update. We got this note, which is, you've got a copy of from Debbie this morning, or I got it this morning. So the first question, which I posed to her, is where do we stand on the survey? And basically, she's saying the third week to the fourth week in June. But it hasn't happened yet. And she's got to work with Max and got to continue to work with Chris to get it advertised. So it's in process. You can read the list of where the status is. We just have no control over that until it's launched. We also had talked, we had a phone conversation with her. Susan was on it, myself and Sharon and Debbie. And we talked about the planning for workshops or charrettes. And of course, her position has been all along that you can't schedule the workshops until you get the feedback from the survey. And we keep arguing, no, we think that there are some subjects that we can start discussing now, which she has labeled as soft subjects, okay? Soft workshops. But the bottom line is we think, at least we have discussed privately, that there's a couple that we could probably have certainly before the survey ever launches. One of them deals with sea level rise, okay? We're gonna have that discussion with or without, any results from the survey, quite honestly. We had asked her, she was going to make contact with DENREC, and in this note, it indicates that they sort of have a very iffy or soft presentation, and she suggested the person at the University of Delaware. I have not yet, I just got this morning, so I haven't made contact with him. And Susan, in turn, has suggested that maybe we want to see if we can get Tony Pratt to come. Of course, Tony was originally DENREC guy and is now in private practice, okay, as a consultant. So I don't know whether it would cost us. Maybe Sharon could answer that question since she just walked in the room. Do we have any contact with Tony Pratt? Any good contact with Tony Pratt these days?
Yes. I saw him this morning.
Oh, you should have grabbed him and held on to him.
Do you think he would come and talk to us about sea level rise? And give us his expert views and all that? Okay.
And do you think we'd have to pay for it? Yeah, okay. But do you think that, we think that that's probably appropriate, and he has a lot of expertise related to that. So we want to schedule, so if you could, find out what his available dates are. Or you can, if you want to give me his contacts, and I'll call him. Okay?
Certainly.
And
All right, we'll be done. by
We're going to
5.
leave on time.
we're not going to be long.
Yeah, we're just,
I have a badge for.
No, no.
we're just
We're not
talking
going to be
about dates,
long.
and then we're, yeah.
We promise.
Or down for one.
Yeah, okay. So I'll make contact with Tony. I'll also make contact with the UDEL guy, okay? And start that process going and see if everybody agrees that should be one of the workshops.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. The other, we had 2 other subjects for, quote, soft workshops. One related to transportation. Too many cars, circulating bus, that kind of thing. Or the other one is to start a conversation on mixed use. And that's of real interest to Pat Taluzzi, Commissioner Taluzzi. Debbie has already been giving her some information on that. Of course, we had a workshop on mixed use back in the previous CDP, but that one could be our first one. and to get that one going. Because again, it comes up related to the hotel, related to downtown development, and we don't even know how to define mixed use, what it is, what people think about it. So we throw those two or those three out. We could probably schedule one early in July, maybe late June, I don't know.
I mean, it would have to be either 2 weeks from today or in July,
Yeah,
because 2 weeks from today would be the last.
and then another one 2 or 3 weeks later, something like
Great.
that.
Let's get started.
Let's get
Okay,
started.
great.
Let me get some information, see availability of people. And again, let's talk about dates. A Saturday date? If we're trying to bring, huh?
I think we should try to have these on a Saturday.
Saturdays. Is that,
Yeah.
Sharon's not here. Is that possible to have facility on Saturday, or is that a problem? You'll talk with Sharon, okay. You're open some Saturdays, aren't you?
Actually, they're open every Saturday till noon, right?
Till noon.
So we could do it 10 to 12.
So we could do it 10 to 12 or 9 to 12 or something like that, okay? Historically,
I mean, the beauty there is there's nothing already scheduled here.
Yeah.
At least that I know of, so
Yeah.
that helps.
yeah,
We don't have to,
historically, when we had them before, we didn't like the idea of a commission sitting in front of people. So we actually put out tables and chairs and sat round table. But the only way we can record anything is to essentially do it in this venue. So I guess we're probably stuck with this kind of
Unless we sit out
setup,
there.
right, Ann?
sit out here like the committees do.
Can we put microphones out? Will we have ways of recording, or?
Yeah, when we had our
Okay.
tree meeting this morning, we were all seated
Okay.
down at that table, and it's all recorded. and video.
Well, except you probably want a bigger table.
Well, we can reconfigure these tables. Oh, we can't?
You can't.
They're wired.
All right, we'll
So,
figure,
yeah, we
we'll
might have
figure
to-
it out. We
yeah.
may have, to.
If you have a lot of people attending, I mean,
yeah,
the tables aren't
okay,
gonna work anyway.
okay. Well,
All the people in the audience wouldn't be at the table, we would be at the table. But again, and then that may mean some of us have their back to the audience, which is not ideal either. So
Yeah.
it probably is better to be up.
Best way to do it.
all right, so let me talk, we'll talk with lining people up, and tentatively, we'll schedule whoever's available, if we can get them. One for sea level rise, or the impact of that, and one for mixed use.
So the 29th might be the first possible.
And the 29th might be the first,
Okay, otherwise the 6th
which is,
July.
the-
I'm just throwing
Yeah,
out some Saturdays.
right,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
we need to talk to people first. Okay? Is that,
Yeah, just for quorum purposes, because I know we have some folks out, the July meeting, I will not be here, the 12th.
you won't be here?
I cannot be here,
Okay.
yeah. And
Lee
the
will
tw-
be back.
And the 29th, I'm traveling back from San Diego for a conference, so just, yeah.
Would all of you send me your schedules, or send Susan and me your schedules, okay, for those dates? And so we'll figure out who's more likely to be
And
here.
you think we could do them like 3 weeks apart?
We probably could,
Okay,
yeah.
that'd be good to
Yeah.
get all three of them.
We'll
in
also have
before
to
the
get
end of
some
summer would be
advertising
great.
out, okay? So
Yeah.
we don't have much time on that. So we got a few steps before we can get to that point. We can't advertise them until we figure out who's coming.
Do we have FOIA requirements on these things?
Probably not more than 7 days, right?
On a workshop?
7 day notice.
7 days, 7 days on a workshop. Yep. Okay?
But it is an open meeting that has to be published and noticed.
Yeah, but, okay, so, Mr. Building Inspector?
I just wanted to comment that the report that you have attached to the documents provided is the current format that will be used prospectively for the building inspector report. So in terms of the previous information that you received will not, on previous months will not be available because the Munis system cannot, the Munis software that we use cannot produce it at this time.
You're talking about the spreadsheet
Spreadsheet.
that had everything in it.
Yeah, it had everything in it. It will not, we talked we want to get it. And we have received certain recommendations that at least all the permits go online, if we get
Yeah.
them online. We're working towards that, but we're not there yet. But the
Okay.
change in the system doesn't allow us to do the further breakdown that we used to provide.
That spreadsheet.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
really
that,
does.
it's
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, the
Yeah.
spreadsheet really was very useful.
Yeah. No, it was useful for planning purpose.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Planning purpose was very useful.
Okay.
But unfortunately, this is what I'm able to provide right now.
Okay, well, from our standpoint, try and get something that gives us that breakdown. Okay? Mr. Glenn?
I thought I'd maybe follow up for a minute based upon some of the comments we had today relating to the Board of Adjustment. Only to mention that we've had an ongoing case in the city of Lewis called NEPA versus the city of Lewis, and that case involved a denial of a variance request by the city's Board of Adjustment. The applicant appealed that decision to Superior Court, and they appealed it on the basis that City of Lewis's code has a provision in the Board of Adjustment that says, we understand that the case law has developed this way, and there's a case called Quick Check that laid out the standards for granting a variance. Lewis said, we understand that, but we think that Lewis is to be coddled, and we were going to implement even stricter standards for the granting of a variance. So the appeal was based on the idea that a municipality should not have the power to make more strict the standards by which a variance can be granted. The Superior Court agreed with that notion and reversed our Board of Adjustment and said, you applied too strict a standard to grant that variance. You need to rely solely on the standards that were set out in the Quick Check case. We disagreed, took that case to the Supreme Court, and just got an opinion issued last week that said the city is correct. You can implement more strict standards for the granting of a variance. So I'm only mentioning it because I know this body has had some irk with the way that variances have been granted previously, and I would say under a previous constitution of the Board of Adjustment. But to the extent that there's interest in pursuing standards that are code implemented, that are stricter than what are the basic standards that have been developed, there's now a Supreme Court opinion that says the city is able to do that. And it may be something you want to propose to City Council, to members of the commissioners.
I mean, to include that language in our code?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But does it mean that
Interesting.
our decisions would have that weight? Or?
No, all it means is that every time the Board of Adjustment makes a decision, where now they're basically relying upon the basic standards of what is an exceptional practical difficulty, and those are
Right.
well-developed standards within the law, they would have to look one step further and say, however, our code says, beyond those standards, we also have to find this, this, and this before we can grant a variance.
Okay, okay. Oh, yeah,
Okay.
interesting.
Has that been discussed with the Board of Adjustment yet?
It has not been discussed. I don't even know if the Board of Adjustment is aware of that case. I mean, it literally came out, maybe, I'm trying to think what day we got it issued. In fact, it was Monday of this week, actually. So it's only been out just a few days. It's a case that's been watched pretty closely by people who do what I do, because it's, you know.
Can you circulate that?
I can, sure.
And what's the name of the case? What- who-
Oh, he'll
NEPA,
circulate.
NEPA.
Oh, okay.
NEPA
Yeah, all right,
versus
yeah.
Okay,
Lewis.
that's interesting.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Relative information, relative to the Planning Commission?
Yeah, I think
By
most
Board
of us
of-
were there that day.
We were there and heard, so. Future meetings. On the 14th, it's going to be a busy meeting in July because Baltimore is coming before us to start the process for a site plan review. So it's a preliminary, is that right?
Site review. That has started with the departments as of yesterday.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, who is coming?
The Baltimore
Oh,
Hotel,
okay.
the Langford.
Oh.
So is it for sure that it's going to come to us, or is it dependent upon other things
We'll
happening?
See what the departments come up with, then
Oh, okay.
according to what they need to do, we'll see if it's ready to come before.
Okay, so we don't know that for sure yet.
When does it have to, how much notice do they need for, 2 weeks? Is that what?
2 weeks?
Is that the standard, 2 weeks?
15 days
15 days.
Okay.
Okay. All right, keep us informed.
These come back, that could be a long meeting.
No new applications? No?
None other than
Okay,
Baltimore Hotel.
okay. Nothing has happened on the other hotel, Hotel 3 or Hotel 2 or whatever it is? Okay. Anything else? Anything from the public? Jay, you just came in to stay cool? You're welcome to. Thank you. Let's have a Jan motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All approve? Aye. Thank you, guys. Anybody want